Ready? All right. All right. Good evening, Vacaville. This is City Council. It's July 23rd, 2024. This is our regular scheduled meeting at 6 p.m. Have a roll call.
Full Agency Authority Member Stockton.
Here.
Silva.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wiley. Here. Vice Mayor Ritchie.
Here.
Mayor Carley.
Here. If you're able, will you please stand for a moment of silence? Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. City Manager, do we have any changes tonight? I do believe we do. For the agenda?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, we do have an item. I believe it is item 9B. B is in boy. We are going to recommend putting that on a subsequent meeting, probably in August. So we're going to pull that item tonight.
Okay. So other than 9B, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Approval of the minutes? Any changes, or do I have a motion? Motion accepted. Second?
Yep.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Tonight we have a presentation, and this is one of those bittersweet ones, but it's also exciting to be able to recognize an employee. And so tonight what we're going to do is ask our Director of Housing and Community Services, Emily Cantu, to come forward to receive a proclamation. I'm going to read this first, and then I'm going to ask you to share some thoughts. But I'm going to read it, and I'll come out and do this. That way I can see it. Whereas today we gather to honor Emily Cantu as we announce her retirement as the Director of Housing and Community Services, marking the conclusion of a distinguished career. Got audience out there? Oh, no, you're fine, okay. Marking the conclusion of a distinguished career that spanned over 2 decades within the city of Vacaville. And whereas Emily began her tenure in April 2000 as a housing services eligibility technician, and through her exemplary dedication and expertise, ascended through several key positions, including Housing and Redevelopment Technician 2, Housing Specialist 1 and 2, and Housing Redevelopment Project Coordinator before her appointment as Director of Housing and Redevelopment in April 2014. And throughout her career, Emily has been a beacon of innovation, compassion, and leadership, significantly enhancing the lives of our residents through her advocacy for affordable housing initiatives, community development programs, and social services. And whereas Emily has passionately worked to assist low-income members of our community in finding housing, and proudly counts the development of Rocky Hill Veterans Apartments and the Pony Express Senior Apartments among her favorite projects. And whereas Emily has spearheaded the construction of over 500 affordable housing units and the preservation of an additional 350 affordable housing units throughout the community, significantly contributing to the housing stability and quality of life for countless families. And whereas her efforts have not only improved individual lives, but have also been instrumental in enhancing communal spaces and infrastructure, such as the installation of directional signage throughout the city and multiple projects in the Brown Street, Markham neighborhood aimed at increasing the quality of life for residents. And whereas the city of Vacaville wishes to express its deepest gratitude to Emily for her unwavering commitment and outstanding performance throughout her tenure, leaving an indelible mark on both our community and our organization. And now, therefore, be it resolved that I, John Carley, Mayor, on behalf of the Vacaville City Council, do hereby proclaim July 25th, 2024, Emily Cantu Day in the city of Vacaville, and honor her for the faithful and dedicated services that she has performed for the past 2 decades, with our best wishes for continued success and happiness in the future. Congratulations. Give me a second to turn on your microphone.
Well, thank you so much, of course, for the very kind words and the proclamation, and of course, the day for me on Thursday. I'll take it. So thank you so much. I've really been blessed to have a great career here with the city, working with the people I work with, both here in this room, and believe me, the dedicated staff of my department, I can't be more thankful for them and their support, because nothing can get done without them. And then, of course, sometimes I bring some interesting projects forward to better the quality of life, affordable housing projects, other projects, and I really appreciate the council's support to get those things done and make the community better, which is what I focus my career on, and I appreciate it. So, thank you.
Well, we're going to miss you. You've certainly provided so much for our community and on staff, and I've appreciated working alongside of you when I was on staff with you, and so really you're going to be missed, and the city is more grateful than ever now for all the work that you've done, and so with that, hopefully you will enjoy your next season, call it Chapter 2. So congratulations. With that, we'll move along, and we'll go to item 6, consent calendar. Does any member of the council or the public wish to pull an item on here that's on consent?
Wanted to put one.
Want to pull?
6D.
60. Okay. Any other member of the public or the council? So do I have a motion to accept? Motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so we'll go ahead and have a discussion on 6D.
Hi, thank you. So I have no problem allocating the funds for these, but during our last budget adjustment, one of the other parks that was listed along with these two parks was Trower Park. So I'm just kind of curious to see from staff, city manager, why is Trower Park not on this list that we went out for bids for as well?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Silva, Councilmember Silva, excuse me. We will be coming back with an update on that particular bid. That bid was extended a couple of weeks because there were a couple of packages out, and so we were hoping that those could come in to get a bigger bidding pool. But as it turns out, we only had 2 bids come in on that, and unfortunately, they were not to our liking, and so we will be bringing that back to council more than likely at your next meeting in August, your first meeting in August, to discuss the next options for that.
So just when did we approve the project approximately for Trower Park? Was it within this year, last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Well, approve the project, it's undergone quite a history. I mean, it started several years ago, and then with augmentations to the design and the materials and so forth, we needed to come back with supplemental augmentation budget request. And so the most recent one was earlier this year in April, as you mentioned, along with the Corderos, and I believe it was the Ulatis Creek Slope Protection Project that we brought that to council in April, with hopefully what was to be the final budget augmentation for those respective projects, and then also the authorization to go out to bid sooner than we normally do, waiting for the fiscal year, in hopes of being able to get better bids. And so Corderos, Ulatis, and Trower all went out for bid. And as I said, we extended the bid for Trower a couple of weeks because of hopeful new interest. But again, that did not occur, and so we'll be bringing back to council in August.
Hey, so I'm just trying to clarify, when was the last time we made any adjustments to the plan? I know we made adjustments to the budgeting for it, but I don't recall anything changing with the plan for at least 2 years.
I'll have to see if, well, unfortunately, I don't believe our park planner is in the audience, so I couldn't give you an exact answer on that one, sir.
Okay, thank you. Motion to approve 6D.
Go ahead and open it up to the public for any comment before I'll accept your motion. Any member from the public want to comment on item 60? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. I'll take your motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll go ahead and we will move on to item 7, business from the floor. This is for any item that is not on tonight's agenda that is within the jurisdiction of the City Council. You're more than welcome to address us directly. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead and come forward.
Evening, Council. My name is Tony Wade, and I am a writer of the Daily Republic, and I do columns on local history. And in 2021, I wrote my first book. It was growing up in Fairfield, California, for you guys behind me. Then in 2022, I came out with Lost Restaurants of Fairfield, California. That's that one. Last year, I had Armijo High School, Fairfield, California. Got an Armijo person back there, all right. And on July 29th, my new book, Growing Up in Vacaville, is gonna come out. And this is all about old school Vacaville, nostalgia. We have I have stuff in there about the Nut Tree, Mayor Bill used to be here, Coach Z. You know, I actually undertook a history of Hamburger Hill, believe it or not, I did. And I did have a book signing at Vasquez Deli this past weekend. It was awesome. I'm going to have another one at Joe's Buffet in Fairfield coming up this weekend. That's at 12:30 to 3:30 in Fairfield. I have a bunch more in Vacaville. You can go to my website, which is TonyWadeAccidentalHistorian.com. And it has all my information on there and about upcoming events. And so I am from Fairfield, so I didn't vote for anybody here. Don't take it personally. But I do want to give you all a gift. I'm going to give free copies of this postcard to all of you. So that's not books, the postcards. But can I leave with the city?
Sure, you can leave.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Joe's Buffet in Fairfield. Anybody knows that place? Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, grumpy old man time. Those of us who'd been opposed to California forever, we were like a whisper against a hurricane. All the things that they're putting out, millions of dollars of falsehoods, we couldn't be heard above it. And we were very sure that when this finally went to the voters in November, that it would pass simply because the negatives could not be heard. However, thanks to the county board of supervisors and them having remembered that they have a commitment to take care of the people who live in Solano County, not line their own pockets, they commissioned I'm sure you all know this they commissioned the county staff to do a study. The study pointed out just how negative California Forever was going to be for us. And so on Monday, California Forever temporarily withdrew their petition or their initiative, and they'll be coming back to see us in a few years. They're not going away. They own 60,000 acres, and they've invested $1 billion by now. But at the end of this morning's board session, Supervisor Brown went off for about 5 hours. Not 5 hours, for about 5 minutes. She could have gone on that long, but she went into some detail about how she had held her tongue for 10 months, and she went into the lies and the thuggish behavior of the California Forever, the way they conduct business. Vice Mayor Ritchie, these are the friends you chose. We know who your friends are. We know who you are.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, and I can't let this pass. Emily, congratulations on your retirement. A couple things. We started up the Vacaville Homeless Roundtable, and your staff's presence has been missed. We're hoping that you will direct your staff to attend some of the meetings, because I think the crew, Emily's old department, are very valuable to addressing some of the issues in Vacaville. And as Mayor Carley and I were talking just earlier this evening, government can't do it all. The second issue that I'd like to talk about is the Supreme Court decision reversing the Ninth Circuit Court ruling. Be careful what you wish for, I guess is the old adage. Now you have a responsibility as a council, as a city, to deal with the homeless. The homeless population is not going down, but increasing substantially. And I was encouraged by your 9C or 9B that was pulled this evening, that you may be looking at how to address a small portion of our, not just our homeless population, but our low-income population. And, as I've often said, as I stood up here, government is not going to do it by itself. We need the cooperation and we need the involvement of the community. So 2 things. I hope you can direct staff to attend the Vacaville Homeless Roundtable. We were under the impression, Mayor, when Gail and I spoke with you, I don't know, a year or so ago, that you thought a good idea to rotate some of the council members through the Homeless Roundtable. We thought it was going to be the Vacaville. But should the Vacaville not choose to cheer it, that's fine. But I think your participation is necessary in order for it to be valuable. Our first couple of meetings, we had over 40 people attend. So the enthusiasm's there. We just would like to have your staff attend. So with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello and good evening. I'm Jeff Alley. I've been a resident of Vacaville for over 30 years, and I wanted to address a problem in the neighborhood with parked cars. It seems that the problem is increasingly getting worse with a plethora of vehicles being parked on our residential streets, causing the most biggest concern being that of a safety issue, unable to see around corners for other traffic coming, emergency vehicles getting through, and just regular traffic passing by when you have vehicles, especially if some of those vehicles tend to be RVs or boats or larger vehicles than width-wise than a normal passenger car. The other issue is we're concerned as residents for the eyesore that it presents. We have some vehicles that have sat there, flat tires, not running, or if they are, and registration's out of date. And even for some of these vehicles that have registrations out of date, I've observed they've sat there so long, street sweeper can't get through to clean the streets, and the weeds get to be 4 and 5 and 6 feet tall around these vehicles. So I just want to address that. I have a possible solution. I know that right now, 72 hours is the code on the books, and you call code enforcement and you address it to them. But I think we need something more. I think perhaps maybe when it comes time for the street sweeper to come through the neighborhoods, vehicles get ticketed or cited for being parked on the street on that side, whatever. But it is getting to be increasingly a worse problem. Like I said, I've lived here for 30 years, and it's probably at its climax right about now.
So, sir, what I'd like you to do is, so you don't have to give up actual locations if you have specifics, if you want to speak to one of our police captains in the back of the room.
Okay.
And maybe get some specifics, and maybe they can help you even from tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? I believe that there's one in the back. Okay.
Hello. My name is Peter Carusos. You have a copy of my note that Mr. Renault had distributed earlier. My topic pertains to the hearings on the resolution to reinstate the industrial zoning on certain parcels in the industrial park over there. I own one of the parcels next to two of the original people requesting a change. And
Yep. So that is coming up on the agenda.
do you want to discuss it?
So
quickly?
we're just out of order at the moment. So
Yeah, okay.
if you just want to pause, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Now that I am clear, I think I know which address you're speaking to. There's a lot of emails on our dais right now, so we'll come back to you. We'll make sure that you speak when we get to 9A. Anyone else wishing to speak on business from the floor? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close business from the floor, and we will go ahead and move into item 8A.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. This first item before you tonight is a resolution and an ordinance related to land use and zoning designations for property over there on Interchange Business Park. Albert Eno, our senior planner, will have a presentation for the council.
And as they're getting ready, sir, it's 8A, so this will be the item that you'll want to speak on.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Albert Eno. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department, and the item before you tonight is the Eubanks and Cotting Lane amendments. This includes 3 requests. The first is to change the general plan map land use designations of 12 parcels from commercial office to industrial park. It's also, the second is to change the zoning map district of 12 parcels from CO to IP. And the third request is to approve a one-time expenditure adjustment to the 2024-2025 fiscal year general fund operating budget in the amount of $35,797. The screen on the right shows the picture of those particular project sites located in the Interchange Business Park west of Interstate 505. In 1977, the policy plan was approved, known as the Crocker Land Company Phase 2 project, which was later changed to Interchange Business Park Policy Plan, as shown on the right of the screen, which outlines the location of where industrial development occurs within the city. Between 1984 and 1992, most of the buildings were approved or built that are currently there now. In 2015, the city underwent a general plan update that changed some of the land use designations within the industrial park, which were largely industrial park designations. Some of them were designated commercial office along Midway Road and then Cotting Lane and Vacaville Parkway, while some other properties along Interstate 505 were changed to highway commercial. Well, also relevant to this discussion is in 2017 to 2019, more projects were built within the industrial park along Crocker Drive. Those were approved and built between 2017 and 2019. One last notable change that occurred was in 2022, in which the city adopted a comprehensive update to the Land Use and Development Code. This was a subsequent change that was obligated by the general plan update from 2015. And what this change did was remove policy plans that also updated the zoning map to change zoning districts so that they complied with the general plan land use map. And that's where our discussion starts. Earlier this year, last year, we had received a request from 3 property owners that were affected by that zoning map change that occurred in 2022 at 610 through 640 Eubanks Drive and 855 Cotting Lane. Those are identified on the map to the right of the screen. And what they had noticed that the change to commercial office created a big problem for them where they could not retrofit their buildings. It would be infeasible, and they were having problems being able to lease to industrial businesses for their buildings. So they submitted an application to initiate a general plan amendment, and we brought that before the council in February of this year. And by unanimous vote, City Council said this was a good idea, but the City Council also directed us to look at some other sites. So we did just that. We looked at 4 other additional locations as identified in the screen on blue, and we worked to evaluate whether or not those should be considered. We found that they were developed with industrial uses and they met the same criteria as some of those other existing sites that we were looking at already. So we coordinated with those property owners as well as part of this overall project, which is identified on the screen. So the project before you tonight involves an environmental assessment, a general plan map amendment, and a zoning map amendment for the properties that are identified on the screen to the right. There involves 12 parcels totaling 35.96 acres. All of these properties are either developed with light industrial warehousing or parking lots. This map shows the change that would occur on the existing land use map from commercial office to industrial park. This exhibit shows the change that would occur on our zoning map from CO to IP. When looking at general plan amendments, there is a consistency determination and a method of review for this. So as part of our analysis, we found that the uses were consistent with the industrial park designation that's defined in our general plan. There's existing infrastructure that can serve all of these industrial uses. Uses would not create any compatibility issues because adjoining uses are, in fact, industrial. And then uses would comply with applicable goals and policies within the general plan. The consistency review for the zoning ordinance is somewhat similar, and so we conducted that analysis also. We found that, again, the uses would comply with applicable goals, objectives, and policies within the Vacaville Municipal Code. Amendments would remove potential compatibility issues with existing industrial. The existing infrastructure is already there in place to serve those future uses, and the amendments would bring the sites closer to compliance as compared to the commercial office district. This diagram shows what those standard comparisons look like in commercial office to industrial park. Commercial office has a little bit more stringent standards. And so changing the designations to industrial park would bring the sites further into compliance. And you can see the status when we were checking for whether or not they complied with all these standards. They do, in fact, those existing sites do comply. So we wouldn't be creating any conformity issues with our existing standards. Another note that we had mentioned back in February was whether or not the project was going to be able to comply with a master water agreement with Solano Irrigation District. In 1972, this is where the agreement first started, and it was intended to be able to provide the city with more water for industrial park, business park designated areas, as well as North Village. And so one of the parts of the agreement was that these industrial projects needed to annex into the SID boundary and pay taxes for the use of that water. Subsequent amendments were occurring in 95 through 2018. And so what we found as part of our analysis was that these properties did need to annex in. And so as part of the process between February and this meeting is that we were working with applicants as well as our colleagues over at Solano Irrigation District. And the property owners were able to provide all the paperwork that was necessary to start that annexation process. And Solano Irrigation District, in fact, provided clearance for this project to be able to move forward. So we were able to satisfy our obligation to comply with that agreement. This project does require environmental review to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. The notable reference here that we'll cite is 15061B3. And really, when you have a change like this, it can be determined to be exempt from environmental review under the general rule, where it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility the project can have any significant effect on the environment. The project shouldn't be subject to environmental review. And in this particular case, what we found was all the infrastructure is already designed. These changes wouldn't make any changes to that existing infrastructure. You wouldn't see any new big buildings built. All this stuff is already there. There's no physical changes to the sites or the landscaping. And so with that, we were confident that no further environmental review was necessary for this project. We held some other public hearings for this process to make sure that we're complying with Vacaville Municipal Code. We held a hearing with Solano Airport Land Use Commission on May 9th, where they voted unanimous to determine that these changes would be consistent with the Nut Tree Airport Compatibility Plan, as well as the Travis Air Force Base Compatibility Plan. We also had a meeting with a hearing with the Planning Commission last month, and the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend to this body approval of these amendments. We conducted public outreach for this project. This started with a new project notice that was mailed on October 27th, and then also noticing that was done for the initiation hearing back in February. We did a notification for the Planning Commission meeting as well as City Council meeting, and we'll note that we received sequential public. Can you still hear me? Okay. From Mr. Peter Caruso's. We most notably found the public comments occurring at the Planning Commission as well as the City Council meeting. And so what we noticed at the initiation hearing when we sent out the public notice, Mr. Caruso's property is located within Eubanks Court at 600 Eubanks. That's the corner. It's where Pure Grain is right now in that bakery. And so what we had heard back from that property owner was that they were in disagreement with the proposed changes, which is why we didn't include his property in these proposed amendments. And that was something similar that we had heard with the Planning Commission meeting. We also received notification from a public comment from Mr. Caruso's in his property citing disagreement with the proposed changes. But it wasn't until the notification that was provided for this meeting that Mr. Caruso's had consulted with relevant industry representatives and realized that he wanted to have his property included with these amendments. So we worked with our city attorney's office to figure out if something like that could be included with tonight. Unfortunately, Mr. Caruso's property would not be able to be included with tonight's item because notification wasn't provided for the Planning Commission meeting or for this particular meeting tonight. So there is an option. Mr. Caruso's could submit a separate application to the city and go through that same process as the property owners have done for this process. That's still afforded to him. So in conclusion, staff and the Planning Commission support the proposed amendments. It meets the required findings that are outlined in our municipal code. It complies with general plan, zoning, and state law, and also complies with the development standards that would be applicable for the industrial park. And with that, we have a couple of recommendations for the City Council, but that doesn't end there. At the last meeting that we had in February, City Council asked us to take a look at a fee waiver, and that's what we did. The property owners at the February meeting asked City Council to waive or refund the fees associated with processing this development application, and City Council directed staff to take a look at some options. So what we found was that fee waivers would not be the route that you would go because there's still staff time that's spent on a project like this. There's still an expenditure that has occurred within the Community Development Department budget. And so the option that's available to the City Council that can be done as part of this project is to amend the 2024-25 fiscal year general fund operating budget. This was an expense that wasn't anticipated for, and so that's where the amendment comes in. It would come from general fund reserves, go to the non-departmental operating budget for community development, and it would be the total cost of $35,797 that would come out of reserves for the operating costs. So there is also a recommendation for the adoption of the resolution that's before the City Council tonight. What we'd recommend if there is a feeling of maybe not awarding that amendment, that perhaps if the City Council wants the applicants to pay that fee, that the entire action ought to be postponed until the payment of those fees could be collected. That's enough out of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The property owners for this project are also here to answer any questions.
Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. The statement you made in regards to the gentleman who is now interested in being a part of the process, whatever the council decides tonight in regards to the fee waiver or whatever, whatever we decide, will he be able to be included in the decision we make? Or will he have to incur the cost, a cost?
So the same action that's before the council tonight to amend the city's general fund, to amend the budget to pull money from the reserves, that would be the same option that would be available to the city council for that separate application.
So if I understand what you're saying is that the gentleman's entitled to go through the same process. This is not proper. This is not noticed in a way that can include tonight, but he is afforded the ability to go through a process very similar or identical to this.
Correct, and there's application fees associated with that, and he can ask for the same fee waiver, but it wouldn't be a waiver because staff would still be spending that money and time to process it.
Understand that? Okay. Sorry, Councilmember Silva.
Just on this question, would it be cheaper to include it in part of this process for us to decide to include rezoning as part of this? Is there a cheaper way of doing it? That's the question.
Yeah, Mr. City Manager, if you can maybe expound on this, because the way I understand it is there's a whole process, which means it's got to go to planning, it's got to go through noticing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's really two issues here, right? So there's the land use amendment and the rezone that are subject of an application. And as Mr. Eno mentioned, we cannot include or expand the scope of what's before the council tonight. Those properties that are being included in that recommendation are finite. That's what was noticed, that was included in the Planning Commission report. So to do any other properties beyond that would require a subsequent application. In this particular case, this individual's property went through the same process as occurred for these other properties that are subject to this review. So it makes sense to suggest that if he is interested in doing that, then follow the same process. Now, the issue of the fees, again, because it's a separate process, there is normally application fees. And I would suggest to you that, those fees cover staff's time to go ahead and process the applications and route it to all the departments and so forth to bring that back through the commission and the council. Should the council decide tonight to consider the applicant's request for fee waivering, which again, as Mr. Eno mentioned, would have to amend the budget to replace those funds, I would suggest that if another application comes in under the same conditions at a later date, that you would consider doing the same practice with regards to the fees. I hope that addresses your question.
Councilmember Stockton.
I just wanted to clarify, in your presentation, it sounded like the gentleman that wants to be added at a later time, did he have the ability to be added to the process that we're doing today and declined or was not involved? Because I was a little confused about that. I just want to make sure he was notified and could have been involved in this process, but
Correct,
was
yes.
not.
The property owner could have been involved in this process, but indication occurred during the initiation period when we brought the item before the council in February that he was not interested and he opposed the overall proposal that was going before council. So that was the indication that staff used that he wasn't interested in making the amendments because he objected the amendments that were going before council.
And that indication that they did not want to be involved, was that in writing or through public comment at the meetings?
It was in writing that was provided to the city council.
All right, seeing no more questions initially, I'm going to go ahead and ask obviously there's two issues here because this was really what's in front of us, but I'm going to go ahead and open up to the public for any comment. And sir, this is your opportunity to speak as well.
No, idea, expanding the types of businesses along the Vacaville Parkway corridor. What I did not understand was how this would make my property non-compliant and seriously reduce the value of my property for sale, which is my ultimate goal. And so I didn't realize that this was actually substantially harming my property. So that's why I thought, hey, this is a great idea. The city council has gone over this. They put a lot of thought into this. I didn't know that I was going to be picking up the bill, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, if I could clarify, it sounds to me like that you're saying that you were in support of it, but if I understand staff, you were not in support of it, so now I'm confused.
I was originally in support of your changes.
Okay.
I like the idea of the additional uses of property on that corridor. What I have since been informed of is that these uses being zoned commercial office on my property now makes my property substantially less valued. My property is now, under these rules, considered non-compliant, even though it's legal, but legal non-compliant, which makes it financing nearly impossible, which makes sales nearly impossible, which makes the whole value in question. This is really, in order to promote what you're doing, which is, still think it's a great idea, unfortunately, it's taking my property's value away from me. And I'd like to get that value back because in the next year or so, I would like to be out of there. My family built this property circa 1988, and we have owned it since then. But it's time for me to retire, and losing this is a substantial cost to me. And what I have been informed by my people and my realtor is that it's lost, I don't have any numbers, it's lost a substantial amount of value if I try and sell it. And so right now, they're not even interested in touching it. So I need to do something to make a change. I need to get it back to what it was and how the building was originally built. Because like I said, this is a great idea. It's great for the city, but it's basically a taking from me. And yes, it's legal, but it's financially harmful to me. And so that's why I have changed my mind and would like to also go back to industrial land use there. My building, my property, when you look at the map, you'll see how tiny that property is.
Yeah, sure, it's on the court.
Yeah, and I'm on the little peninsula. 3 sides are surrounded by street. It is not rebuildable to commercial office standards. which makes it basically a non-rebuildable property if it's lost in damage.
Okay, I think I understand, and I've gone over on the time just to give some better clarity for you. So yeah, thank you for your comment.
That's why I've changed my mind. That's all I'm trying to say. Yes, everything you heard is correct, but unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the public wishing to comment on this item? Yes, sir, please come forward.
I'm one of the property owners. I was before you in February, and I don't have anything substantive to add to the meeting tonight, other than I just wanted to express my appreciation to city staff, and in particular Albert and Aaron, for guiding us through this process over the last year and a half. It's been a long road, a very long road, but we're finally here, and we're grateful to be here. I also wanted to thank you, our city council, for the way that you handled the February initiation meeting. I've been in the real estate business for over 40 years, and I've worked with cities up and down the state. And it's rare, really rare, to have a city recognize an error and then work expeditiously to correct that. And that's what's happening here. And it's just nice to see a well-run city at work. So I think now if the only thing remaining is reimbursement of our fees, which we'd love to see to be all square. But I want to thank you for your consideration, and thank you all for getting us to where we are tonight.
Thank you. All right, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public comment side of this item. Councilmember Wiley.
Just one question based on what he said, reimbursement of our fees. So from what I understand is if we approve this budget amendment, then it goes to community development, but then a check will be paid to reimburse their fees?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
One of the comments, and sir, I appreciate your comment. If I understood it right, there was an original zoning. It was changed to the office, and tonight it's moving. You know, what we're looking at is what was properly noticed is to make that commercial again. And the difference is that his property, based upon his response, was excluded from that, and so his property still continues to be, as he said, non-conforming. Just so it's clear, could you explain that?
Yeah, that's correct, yes. So when we sent out the initial notification to the property owners within the affected area, we heard back from some of them, and those are the ones that are included with the proposal for tonight. We also heard back from the property owner at 600 Eubanks indicating that he was opposed to it. But from his testimony, he mentioned that he's had some time to think about it and talk with professionals to figure out that it'd probably be in his best interest to be included with that proposal. So when it comes to non-compliant, it goes back to the original issue that was at hand.
And then, because I think there's a difference. Right?
It's a levy.
It's a levy, okay. And were any of the property owners delinquent on their taxes?
I couldn't answer that.
Okay. And then, in terms of the levy, say they don't pay their tax bill, what's the process then? Can then, do you rely then on the county to basically foreclose on the property? Does the county have the power to do that?
What I'd like you to do is, this is your 2 minutes, and we'll collect the questions and answer as best we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, despite the good notice, I just think it's important before you put a levy on the property, if they're having some kind of financial hardship, they could have the income, but maybe they're not paying their tax bill either. I just don't know how effective this is in terms of getting paid back. It'd be nice to know what's the success rate on in prior attempts to levy tax bills for this kind of thing. Does the city generally get paid? And then, but you know, it's just, I think you have to consider, is this going to cause an undue hardship, financial hardship on the property owner? Is there some other way to collect other than sending notices? Thank you.
Add on to that, I have a problem with attaching people's homes for a crack in the sidewalk, but there was a bill that was like under $300. Would that mean that someone could potentially lose their house if they couldn't pay that bill? I think there's too big a discrepancy there, if that's true. Maybe that's not the case. So I just think that I'm glad that there's an income-based fee, but 200, whatever that figure was, $98, makes me think that somebody's having real income issues. Maybe not. Maybe they're just scoffing at the city and saying, heck no, I'm not paying your bill. But I tend to err toward somebody's having a hard time, and I don't think we should compound that by putting a lien on their property. It seems to be that there's something else in the middle that's missing.
Thank you. Seeing no more from the public, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back. And Brian, if you can answer any of those questions, and then I might have a comment.
I can. Thank you, Mayor. So this is not a foreclosable issue. This is actually, this lien process is modeled exactly as the fire department's weed abatement lien process, which you heard earlier this year, and which has been going on for several decades. This process allows for the city to be able to recoup those funds, those monies that sit on that levy or lien, sit on that property until the point of sale. This process does work. It does take some time for the city to be able to recuperate it in some instances. But otherwise, it allows the city, through the municipal code, which was approved by City Council in August of 1979 for this particular ordinance, to be able to continue to keep the city sidewalks in a good condition. We have, along with our roadways, as the mayor is understood from the STA, we have some of the best roadways in Solano County, and that goes the same for our sidewalks, because we have a process in place to be able to address these issues.
Thank you. I can appreciate the comments. Nobody wants to see a lien. Maybe one question for you then is being able to, we saw the diagram where there's a big, long process. Seems like we try to give an owner as much opportunity to engage with the city, to work through an issue, which it likely would be if there was a complaint. You said we don't necessarily go looking for them, but if a complaint comes in, there's an inspection. It's a safety issue. And an attempt to resolve it starts from there, but maybe you can add more detail to that.
You've absolutely nailed it, Mayor. It's a minimum of 10-month long process with 6 notices to the property owner. The city wants to resolve these issues. We want to, through those multiple outreach attempts with the particular property owner, to be able to bring them in and have a discussion. And we're more than willing, working with the finance department, to set up a 6-month no interest payment program to be able to resolve the matter. If we don't, we will end up having a situation as in some of the other cities in this county whose sidewalks are in very bad disrepair, and it becomes a functional issue in terms of pedestrian safety as well as ADA in terms of the path of travel along a decent sidewalk.
Councilmember Wiley.
Thank you for the information. And so this is an annual thing because this is for 23-24. So on a generally, when you get complaints, like is this 10%, 90% of the people solve their problem? Or is this 50% or what?
That's a great question. So this is actually the first annual sidewalk repair lien hearing that we've held. We are at this juncture because back in fiscal year 23, council decided that the cost of sidewalk repairs was exorbitant, and council desired to have a mechanism to be able to help the public in terms of those that qualify to be able to reduce the cost of these repairs. Staff, public works staff, fire code compliance staff, and Emily's housing staff worked together to develop a program. That's the sidewalk repair pilot program, to be able to develop a mechanism to be able to help people who had problems being able to affording to be able to do those repairs. We're at that juncture point now where this is the first cycle through of the program as it's been running for the last year.
So most of the people pay it, and this is just a small number.
So before tonight, we actually had eight properties, 2 paid, and the balance 6 are before you tonight.
All right, and I do really understand it's a major thing, because one resident in a wheelchair in my district has said it's very difficult to get around when the sidewalks are in bad repair, but he also knows it's a cost to his neighbors, so he's not really willy-nilly calling code compliance and say, come look at every little crack. But if he tries to talk to the homeowner too, because that's an option that you can do that. But I do feel like it's important that we get these fixed and not just let them get worse and worse. So thanks for the information.
Appreciate that. Any other comments or a motion? Motion and second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? I appreciate it. I appreciate the comments on that. There's always a concern on the hardships, but I think that with a very robust staff, the goal is to work with people and not simply just go straight to some levy. I mean, there's a lot of work being used in staff time. And my final comment on that is, at what point does the city just pick up the bill for everyone? And that's untenable. So there has to be a balance, and it sounds to me like that you've tried to strike that, and hopefully we can have as few of these as possible each year. So thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. This next item before you is the consideration of using Measure M funds for the Brown Street Park and Community Center project, bringing to you in her final presentation in her illustrious career on this subject, Miss Emily Cantu.
Last time I'll fumble through the technology. Thank you for the introduction. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. Back at the May 14th City Council meeting, the City Council did discuss reallocating $8.4 million of Measure M funds that in the fiscal year 2018-19 were set aside for the Grassfield complex and Fire Station number 72 relocation. The request for reallocating, because there had been no progress beyond the initial year's funding, and that's because a couple things. Cost had skyrocketed significantly, and funds were subsequent funds were used to fund other park improvements and adding amenities to other parks. That same evening, the City Council discussed some other priority projects that are listed here on the slide and in the staff report. And the City Council was aware that the $8.4 million, based on the cost of the other priority projects, would not be sufficient to pay for all of those projects. So that was part of the discussion as well. So at the time in May, there was no time constraint to make a particular reallocation decision that evening. So the funds were not reallocated. However, the City Council did decide to go ahead and unencumber those $8.4 million from the Grassfield Complex project and the Fire Station 72 relocation project. Staff came before you on June 11th to give an update on a couple of those projects, the priority projects, the Safe Routes to School and the Northeast Growth Area. The Safe Routes to School, you were presented with a plan for $16 million improvements for school safety improvements to 20 projects, some of which there's a plan to get those rolling this summer and fall, and then the plan for the larger dollar amount, longer term projects is to work with the Solano Transportation Authority as well as other grant funding sources to pull the funds together and implement the remaining projects. And then the Northeast Growth Area project. The funds to advance the planning efforts in this fiscal year were included in the community development budget when you approved the budget for this fiscal year. After that meeting, staff did put together some project summaries for the City Council with additional details and the background and the importance of each of the 4 remaining priority projects that, again, are listed on the slide and the staff report. Before that Measure M discussion, just as a reminder, at the April 23rd meeting, staff came and provided an update on the Brown Street Park and Community Center project. The city has a $6.7 million statewide parks program grant fund. We talked about the process for that to create the application, submit that application, the award of funds, and what has been completed towards that project since that time. We concluded with an update on the construction cost increase and other factors that had occurred that resulted in an $18.1 million total project cost. Taking away the 6.7 million or subtracting the 6.7 million we have in hand and available reduces that gap to 11.4. And staff mentioned and provided information about some potential other funds that can be used towards that project if the council chose to take some future actions. Those funding sources are included as an attachment to the staff report, so you can see the details of what those are. Of about 4.625 million, so the current gap before you this evening is 6.775 million, and is the request for you to consider if you'd like to allocate a portion of that 8.4 million that was recently unencumbered towards this Brown Street Park and Community Center project. So why are we bringing this back now? With a little time going by, you may want to consider addressing this funding gap because you will need to comply with the requirements of the state grant. So to retain those funds, the project needs to be completed, operating open, folks enjoying the park and community center by the end of 2027. Additional information to keep in mind also provided to you in April. If the project's not completed on time, the grant funds would need to be returned. The community development block grant funding that's been used to date may need to be replaced with other funds. Also to keep in mind, the state will accept a reduced scope of work, so we could scale back amenities. In order to significantly reduce the scope, you'd have to scale back the amenities significantly. Like major portions of the amenities would have to be taken out, and there would still be a gap in funding even after that. And finally, there's no guarantee that the state will approve a scope change or reduction. So again, tonight is for you to consider if you'd like to allocate 6.775 million of recently unencumbered Measure M funds to the project to meet that deadline, December 2027. That will give time for the project to complete its entitlement approval process, Public Works to prepare the public bid packet, put it out to bid, get responses, select a contractor, make the award, enter into a contract, and then start and complete construction. And the outcome of that would be to realize the vision for the site that was created by the community and have a long-term impact, a positive impact on the neighborhood and the community overall. So tonight we do have a few things for the alternatives that the council could consider. while they're thinking about and discussing the funds for the Brown Street project. You could approve the $6.775 million for the project. You could not approve the funds for the project. This would mean you would need, the $6.7 million grant would need to be returned, and you may need to replace the CDBG funds with other funds if it's required. If the funding for Brown Street Park is not approved, you could direct staff to bring other priority projects to a future meeting for discussion and consideration. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, colleagues are available for specifics in their area if it comes up. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Any council questions on the presentation? Two questions.
One question, what was reduced from the original plan? I think the original estimate was a little bit higher, so I know we did some value engineering. Just elaborate a little bit more on that.
There have been no changes since what was presented in April. In the project summary, there are some ways that the project could change and the itemized reduction amounts in there, but no changes have been made since April. So the project remains the same with all the amenities at $18.1 million.
And then one of the things that within the concept, which is a great concept, by the way, is that particular stage being able to get some type of electrical access or some type of screen or whatnot. How would it work? I understand there's certain ordinances that we have will require some exceptions or not. We've done exceptions for big developers. I don't understand the challenge of why we couldn't do that for this if we move forward with it. But what are there possibilities to have sponsorships for different amenities within this park to drive down the cost of this to if we decide to approve it?
Yes, I think the city does seek and accept sponsorships for park projects, amenities, or events, or whatever the case that we're seeking funds for, sponsorship funds for.
Do you think in your experience and your wonderful career that it would be much easier to get those sponsorships or funding or additional grants if it's approved tonight?
So
in your experience.
Yes, in my experience, that's an interesting question. Thank you.
You just say yes.
Sponsors often want to know if a project will happen to commit funds, but at other times sponsors may, do a pre-commitment with a solid commitment down the road if the project moves forward.
Thank you, Emily.
Councilmember Wiley.
I don't recall exactly the year because I had not been in town very long, but my kids were little and the Great Wonders Park was built. And I just remember a great bit of community outpouring. And then shortly after that, it burned down and the community really rallied behind and it was rebuilt. So I was just thinking along the same lines when you brought that up. So it seems like if we can get this along the road, then the community would probably step in a lot of ways like they did twice at the Great Wonders Park.
Question? Any other questions before I open up to the public? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up to the public.
Hello, my name is Faye Salfidi. I'm on the Vacaville Arts Advisory Committee. I'm also a small business owner here in town. I have 4 business licenses with the city of Vacaville, one of which is Bliss Urban Arts Center, a dance studio. Speaking as an artist, but also a community member, I feel like I'm a go for this project because it would obviously bring our community together through art and culture and events, especially in the multi-purpose room with the theater. For somebody like me who almost lost my business during COVID, renting from the Vacaville Performing Arts Theater or Journey Downtown has been absolutely outrageous since the price of everything has gone up, and most of my families are low income. So having to rent a very expensive theater and make tickets very high just for them to be able to not afford to come to the show, and then coming out of pocket to rent facilities like that. It's a lose-lose across the board, but having another venue for me to be able to rent from would create more opportunities for my dancers to perform, create more opportunities just to even rent the kitchen out or see the art in the park, and bring that community together closer, because I just feel like there is a gap when it comes to the support from city officials and inclusivity with the community, and we need to bridge that gap. And even though it sounds nice when city officials talk about being inclusive, it's not actually happening. And it would be great for this project to go through so that can actually happen. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Good evening.
Good evening. I sent you all an email, and I had done some research. So there's the empty parcels on Brown Street, and then and looking at the recorded deeds for the Brown Street parcels, there's also attached resolutions from the city, because you kind of have a lot of history in this neighborhood. We go back in time. What was identified through my research is, as far back as 1988, there was the Trower CDBG target area of North Vacaville. And Trower is one of Vacaville's oldest CDBG target areas. The funds being, that were requested, I think it was like late 90s, early 2000, the city requested a loan from HUD under preferential terms. And in addition to the HUD loan, there was the Economic Development Initiative grant, and together with CDBG funds, and it was supposed to revitalize and actually develop those Brown Street parcels. In fact, the city old redevelopment agency had dedicated redevelopment funds that actually purchased those lots. So they were actually in the Vacaville Redevelopment Agency's name. And then, but anyway, going back to the HUD, the HUD grant. So HUD, was told by the city that there would be all these great things that would be, built on the Brown Street site to provide services to the neighborhood. And that, included CalWorks. There was supposed to be a Centro Cesar Chavez facility for parenting, counseling, drug and alcohol treatment. There was a workforce investment board for job training, placement services. A Planned Parenthood was planned, a Rainbow Center, women, infant, children, vouchers for nutrition, food, yada, yada, yada. So the bottom line is, there's been a long history of the city trying to build something great for this neighborhood, to bring it up, to remove blight, to revitalize the neighborhood. This is long overdue. Yes, is it more expensive than had it been built when it should have? Absolutely. But that's the problem with inflation. And what's funny is, in 1988, when the Trower CDBG program was created, Measure I, which is, by the way, everybody may not know, your water sewer bill is taxed. It's an excise tax. Measure I went to the voters, and that was to help at-risk youth, parks. Measure M in 2016, at-risk youth, parks. So when these ballot measures are written, I mean, really, Vacaville has pulled at the heartstrings of voters and told them, look, we want to direct money to these disadvantaged communities, like where you would see the at-risk youth and parks. And so we owe it to them to allocate these voter-approved funds to that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi. I think I just want to say what she said.
Sometimes that makes it easier, right?
Yeah, but I mean, she said a lot of what I planned to say. I came before you previously, highlighting the lack of any spaces in the Brown Street area for children to play and neighbors to gather for celebrations, recreations, and leisure activities. All of those things are still true. We have the $6.7 million grant, which I found an article in the Reporter dated 2021 that reported on the, at that time, Brown/Markham Neighborhood Public Recreation Improvement Plan, which was approved by that city council, which was, I don't think, any of you, on October 13th which created a strategic neighborhood action plan for improved recreation amenities serving the neighborhood of Brown Street and Markham Avenue. It included the remodeling of Trower Park, additional improvements along the Rocky Hill Trail, and, quote, building a new recreation and city facility on a Brown Street property. That's what we're talking about. That's where that council directed the appropriate departments in the city to apply for the SPP grant, which is the $6.7 million grant that we're talking about giving back. I can't believe we want to do that, especially seeing as how the bill has been reduced. It's now down from 18 million to 6.775 million. And we do have Measure M funds. The residents have participated in some of the planning. Some of them have been around long enough to have been waiting and waiting and waiting for this to happen. I think that you need to not miss this opportunity to address this community, which has been promised for years and years. And it's incumbent upon you to see this through to completion now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Carly, Vice Mayor Ritchie, council members, and city staff. My name is Italia, and I am an upcoming sophomore at Woolseywood. I think the Brown Street Park project is a great idea for families to bond and to get together. The thing that interests me about the Brown Street Park project is the possibility of having murals and other types of art in the area. I personally have always admired art being displayed on the streets, and if we had the youth and other people from the community help with the mural or other types of art, it would mean a lot more to me and to the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Mayor Carly, Vice Mayor Ritchie, members of the council, and city staff. My name is Natalia Recinos, and I will be an upcoming 8th grader at Willis Jepson Middle School in the fall. I'm here today as a resident of District 3 to encourage the Brown Street Park project. I truly believe that if the Brown Street Park project is approved, it will bring tons of delight for not just people who live in that area, but also the rest of Vacaville. I think we can all agree that the Markham neighborhood needs a lot of improvements. Obviously, it has changed over the years, but moving forward with the park project can be one of the many steps to make the Markham neighborhood be seen as a more friendly area to be in. The whole idea of celebrating culture with this park project is very meaningful to the community. Markham Elementary is known a lot for the bilingual program. A lot of people in the area are Latino, and they would help to have a place that is close where their culture can be celebrated. I really like the idea of a community center with a commercial kitchen. This would benefit my family, and it will also benefit many others. I'd like to add that my mom and aunt run their own business from home and make pupusas, which is a Salvadorian dish. Having access to a commercial kitchen would be useful to them and other people that run their own food businesses. This would help support small businesses and their families. I also think that this park project will be great for young kids that attend Markham Elementary and other nearby schools because it's a nearby park other than Trower Park. The Brown Street Park project will offer more amenities such as a splash pad, soccer field, a toddler playground, and a potential space to rent for cultural parties. In the end, this project will bring a lot of smiles to people's faces. I really appreciate being able to speak with you tonight and being able to use my voice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council. I have a letter that the Solano County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has written. I'd like to read it to you tonight. Our board has reviewed the staff report for the reallocation of Measure M funding, and we are encouraging you to please vote to fund the Brown Street project. The Brown Street project presents a significant opportunity for economic development. As drafted, the project creates entrepreneurial opportunities for a community and area that has long been underserved. It creates a space for cultural events which draw thousands of people to the area, increasing foot traffic to current businesses. It provides jobs in both the construction of the project as well as the project itself. As business leaders, we know that there are always competing needs for any available funds. We know that the other projects presented also need funding, but those projects should be funded through other funding mechanisms within the city. This project cannot. As business leaders, we also know the importance of leveraging funds. The city and state have already allocated money to this project, showing that everyone believes in what the project provides. Because of COVID-related cost increases, the project cannot be completed as it is funded. And so without this Measure M money, the city will lose the benefit of the $6.7 million grant from the state, leaving that money on the table. We cannot afford to do that. Voting for the Brown Street project tonight will show the city's commitment to economic development, to job creation, and to deliver on a promise that we thought was made 20 years ago, but maybe longer, to create a space for this community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Kim Castaneda. I am a resident of Vacaville and I'm part of the Hispanic Chamber, so I'm also right with them and what they have to say. But I also wanted to share just my feelings about the project in that as a resident here, when I first moved here a little over 25 years ago, I remember we bought a house over in Browns Valley, and our realtor never drove us through the Brown Street area. And then one day I was looking for a volunteer project and I ran into the Trower Neighborhood Center. And so I went in there to go volunteer. Reggie Hubbard was there and he was like, do you want a job? And I got a part-time job there and I just fell in love with the community. And I worked there for a while and love Vacaville, and I was so impressed by what you did there in the community, like when you made the Trower Neighborhood Centers and the Acacia Neighborhood Center, the Mariposa Neighborhood Centers, some of the redevelopment that I heard was done there to improve the area at that time. And I was from San Jose, and so I brought people, when I would bring people by, I would always drive them through and say, look at what they've done and the neighborhood that they built, because we have a lot of struggles in San Jose with our neighborhoods. And so I would love you to just please put Measure M money back into that neighborhood and finish what you already started, which is so impressive to me as a resident here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry Gonzalez, I'm a board member of the Solano Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to address that this project is amazing. You guys have a great opportunity in your hands right now to decide what to do with this, but one of the key things that I wanted to address as a business advocate in the county, incubator kitchen is really needed in this county. There's a lot of issues in other cities within the county, and incubator kitchens are really needed. It helps bring revenue to the city, to the county, and it also creates jobs. So please consider this opportunity you do have in hand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment on this item and bring it back to the council for discussion. Obviously, thank you for your comments tonight, and it seems like there's a lot of support for this. This is an opportunity for the council now to deliberate on this item. Let me see who spoke first. Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate the update and the information on the current financials of this project. I'm in support of it for numerous reasons. As was brought up, there's an economic development standpoint of it. Is within 2 blocks either direction, there's probably about a dozen family-owned, minority-owned businesses that would get a inject income from people playing at the park and going out to eat lunch, going to the convenience store, going to get the car wash. Lots of different things right there. Park, like quality of life, and then also like a sense of pride. It's like, do you all live next to a dirt field, or are you more proud of your home that it's next to a park or across the street from a park, walking distance? As I mentioned before, my dad lived off North Callan for a little while, so I did spend a lot of time in that neighborhood growing up, and there was literally nothing to do besides getting in trouble. So that's currently how it kind of sits in that neighborhood. So I think it would help out the entire area on multiple aspects, on not just being a park for people to go play out and hang out at. And yeah, unfortunately, it is quite expensive now. If we would have taken care of it 30 years ago, like was initially planned, would have been much, much cheaper, but inflation never goes negative. So the longer we put it off, just the more expensive it's going to be. And we have the risk of losing grant funding because of that, which does make it more affordable. And also the Measure M, we've used it for some pretty good stuff over the last few years. But I think it's time that we do show the other side of it, to actually put in a park that was part of the initial aspect of it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councilmember Chapman?
Thank you. Appreciate all the comments that have been shared this evening. I have a little history, a lot of history, really. If you look at Measure I, you may see my signature on that initiative. The redevelopment funds that the city received many years ago, and all of a sudden the state says cities don't need that money any longer. But I remember how those funds were being utilized, and primarily they were being used in the Brown Street area. A lot of work. And the young lady that came up and said, you know, her realtor didn't take her through there, but once she did, she saw the things that had been accomplished. And she witnessed some of that change that took place, and all of a sudden it stopped. I am one, I've been in a civil servant for many years. Measure I not only was for the city, it was a partnership with the school district. Both benefited from Measure I. When you, the language that was used in the ballot, it's hard to believe if you don't see it, say, oh, they said this would be done with it. However, it was done, but it might have been done within another project. But regardless, there was much more work needing and still needs to be done in District 3. I don't think anyone residing in Vacaville would deny that. We owe it to them. Measure M, when it was passed, I thought Measure M was for parks and improve the quality of life, which entails, you know, the streets, anything that would improve the quality of life for the residents. We have used some of those funds, and I questioned it when I first became a council member. I used the term commingling of funds, and which shouldn't be done, and I still stand on that. And I think it will cease one day. With all this being said, receiving a grant is not always easy. And then not to fulfill the request. You said you need these funds for this particular reason, but yet time passes and you end up having to send it back. That should be a no-no, always. There is a deadline that must be met, and sometimes those deadlines or that period will slip by before you know it, and then you have to rush. What can we do to use those funds? We almost lost funds that we ended up giving to Habitat for Humanities. Time was running out. But we were able to find a means to meet the criteria of those funds so that they are still being utilized in Vacaville. So I'm saying all of this to say, I support the work that needs to be done. I support the amenities that are needed in the area for the children. People know youth are my heart. They're my heart. And I know the importance of how they save lives. How, when you put amenities like that in place, how it actually saved lives. Children will find themselves, parents, people will find themselves in that park, whether they're alone or if they meet someone. Again, I want to cut this short. I'm bringing it back. So with that, I support providing the funds for the Brown Street project.
So what I'd like to do is, there's some more lights on here, but I want to make a few comments. Listen, I support the idea of revitalizing and developing Brown Street and to enhance the quality of life for the residents in the neighborhood. I support a lot of things. What I don't support is spending $11.4 million to get $6.7 million. There's a financial discussion to be had here also. Measure M is for a lot of things, and I appreciate your comments. It's for parks, streets, quality of life. It's for safety. Measure M was also at a time when we were facing a fiscal cliff. The concept of Measure M, having been part of that, was also to make sure that what we didn't do is that we didn't go bankrupt. We didn't lay off people. We were in one of our worst economic crises. We'd already had version 1, and we were into version 2. And so we were deficit spending, and we were running out of money. We're deficit spending right now. So in good conscience, knowing that we're running out of money, I can't imagine that what we would do is see the fiscal cliff and say, well, for a vision and a dream, we're going to position ourselves to make a financial decision that puts us potentially over the cliff. No one could predict the increased expenses, which is one of the reasons why an earlier item tonight needs to go back for a bid, because it's too expensive. So while I completely have been in support of the idea of this, it was when we thought it was going to be $6.7 million, not when it's going to be 18.1. And so the reality is we're not only coming up with 7 or 6.775 million, we're also, we would be allocating an additional 4.625 million. So taxpayer dollars into funds that we can use, not all of them Measure M, equates to $11.4 million. This item is a wonderful item. It's in no location on the priorities that has come before the council when we're trying to put together a multi-use facility at Centennial Park. So there's no allocation for what we're trying to do. And this project was a great idea, is a great idea, but not to the tune of $11.4 million when we're deficit spending. That is the issue for me. It's not that it's not a wonderful place for something. But as a city, we have to govern it. We're at a state where our neighboring cities are trying to raise taxes right now because they're in a fiscal cliff. And I have, my memory's long enough to know how we got here. And it was bad as an employee. It was everything that they could do to not lay off employees. And it was cuts for, it seemed like, 8, 9 years of employees in frozen positions. And I can't in good faith and conscience put us in a fiscal bind. At the same time, we were asked earlier in the spring to prioritize or to have a discussion, and it seemed like we went into prioritizing which one of those projects in trying to unencumber 8.4 million. And that's great because some of those projects really didn't look like they were viable projects. But the thought of then saying, okay, those weren't viable projects, we're going to put it into a place where just like any one of us would want to save for that rainy day fund, we can't print money. And so me personally, when I look at some of those other issues, those projects that are in front of us, for that reason, I can't support that tonight, because my view would be what we need to do is we need to bring back a detention basin, because I've watched the floods.
Oh, I live.
And so to spend all this money and to realize that we could put the city in jeopardy, both in a fiscal cliff, and we have a detention basin plan that needs funding, and there is potential grant funding, but it's still going to be a shortfall. That is where my priority is safety, and safety of the community has to be a priority. Solvency of this city government has to be a priority. It's for that reason I can't support it tonight. Councilmember Stockton.
Thank you for the presentation. I think this does need to be a park, but just like many of our parks in Vacaville, I mean, Centennial is a great example. It has to be done in phases. It's very difficult to come up with the totality of the financing that's needed to be able to build it. And one of the options that was on there today was to go back to the state and see if we might be able to measure the project to be able to qualify for the grant so we don't lose those money, the money for that. That's not to say that we can't complete the different phases to make it into the image that I think was presented to us in the future, like we do with many other parks. I grew up in District 5. I too have seen the impacts of flooding, what can happen, and I know that there's a multitude of things that we would love to see done with Measure M money. I would like staff to go back and to see if we can talk to the state about trying to maintain the qualifications for the grant to do as much as possible that we can afford, knowing that we could still go back as we get through, as we get through some of the financial uncertainty and we're not deficit spending, and be able to add on to complete the park in the different phases to get it there to the vision that was presented, but also without handicapping, our use of these funds that could be used to save people's homes if we do have flooding and some of the other projects that were listed as a priority. I also believe that we do need to follow up with the commitments that we make. We made a commitment. We've spent millions of dollars to redo Trower Park, and I want to see that done. It wasn't included in the consent calendar today, and I think that needs to be done because we did make that commitment. We've spent millions of dollars there, and I wish we had enough millions and millions of more dollars to be able to complete all of these projects that we hope to get done. But I think that we have to be cautious with the spending of the taxpayers' money, and we should at least look at going to the state and seeing if we could phase this project on Brown Street before we spend $11 million. That's my opinion. So I think that we need to go there before we approve spending $11 million to build this in its totality without phasing it. That's just my opinion.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, Roy just brought up a good idea and thought process on potentially seeing if the state would allow us to phase in pieces that still meet the requirements to keep the grant funding, but it's still like to allocate the money tonight just in case. Because part of it is like we brought up numerous times from this council that we hold developers accountable for the promises that they make on parks. And if we're not doing that as a city, leading by example on our own promises, then what are we doing here? If we're being, yeah. So I think we need to lead by example with that if we expect others to do the same thing.
So can you be clear? You're saying to approve tonight and ask for a phase adjustment? Or for a reduction, or I just don't understand.
Yeah, just reiterating kind of like what Roy said, because the state can approve adjustments to it. That doesn't mean we can't adjust the plan still, correct? Or just allocate the money if the state does allow us to shift the money around or go to phase. That's up to them at that point. Otherwise, we just default back to the current plan, correct?
As long as the scope of work, whatever that may be, is approved by the state and completed by December of 2027, then we can retain the 6.7 million.
So
if they approve it, excuse me.
Yeah, so we can approve this tonight, and then you can go to the state and ask if we can make adjustments to it just as long as it's completed by 2027, correct?
We can, yes, we could go to the state also.
Okay.
Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you. Just want to comment on some of the comments, a couple of comments that have been made. And the flood situation, that's in District 4, that's in my district. And I appreciate the support that has been mentioned tonight in regards to how we still, that is a priority. It is a priority of mine. And as I stated earlier, I don't like seeing money returned. And with that said, don't think I've given up on the flooding situation. And I feel next year is going to, or the incoming year, it's not going to be favorable. That's just a gut feeling I'm having. And I've had conversations with Brian when he has said, can he look to me for assistance when we were talking about the funding, the cost of this. And I'm committed. I'm committed, and I hope all of you are when we're talking to our congressional or our representatives. When we talk about sponsors, corporations, developers, there's no reason sometimes whether you are aware or not, as business people, we expect you to give back to the community in which you reside and you have your livelihood. We need to call on some business people. So I'm just saying, and with that, when you mention the $11 million, after you subtract the 6.4, 6.7, anyway, I believe Emily had stated that there's a possibility of where 4 million may be located, so we're not looking at 11 million. We're looking at, I think, 6.
But we're encumbering other funds that are going to be here, and so you're right.
Right.
It's encumbering from other sources, but we're cobbling up everything and putting it here when we have other priorities that are of high risk, which is the safety of flooding and also our fiscal cliff. If we end up with, Measure M is our insurance fund. And so in a sunny day, it was always great to be able to use it to enhance quality of life, to improve the parks, to do all the things. But when money gets tight, and we've seen presentation after presentation, especially going through the budget process, yes, we did make a decision, and we told city staff that we were okay with some of the deficit spending. So we're deficit spending. But I'm not okay driving our Measure M reserve, which is for an insurance from a financial cliff, to say, well, let's just keep spending and keep spending. There's a point in my life where I stop spending money. That's all I'm saying. And I would prefer going back to the state and saying, what can we get? Because I can't believe that with a city and the capability of being creative to say, we may not be able to get everything that we want, but to put a park somewhere is not, I mean, that's still a great idea. But can you tell me, or Mr. City Manager, how much money have we spent on either phasing parks or building parks or improving parks if we include Trower Park, even though it's not done yet, in the last 3 years?
We can't include Trower Park because that's getting kicked off. So until it's broken ground,
okay, well then
that's not a fair or
that's fine. So other than Trower Park, how much have we spent in the last 3 years?
So in the past 3 years, we've actually been planning a bunch of different parks, but actually physical funded is roughly just over 3 million.
3 million? Okay. So it's not as if we're not investing in parks. So, Councilmember Wiley.
Yes, we have spent over 300 million in the last several years, but prior to that, we hadn't spent money on parks other than regular maintenance. It's been a long time since a park has been built, and I believe that Measure M was sold to the people as parks and a lot of other things to help our city, and it's an investment in the future to do what we can for the young people. I'm thinking about, we did have a new park, but it was a long, hard-fought battle to get the Play for All Park, and that was greatly enhanced by the community's help. And like I said, the Great Wonders Park, the Play for All Park, I understand about finances, and I can't ask our finance director to say, hey, put some money there for community help, because I know it's going to come. So I understand the reluctance to deficit spend. But the money that we're talking about tonight has been sitting for quite some time as the ballpark that was set up, and people were, really interested in doing something for the kids of Vacaville and to have it as a recreation facility. So I think it's all well and good that we can use that for this park. I understand the fire station relocation, the detention basins, all those are great things. But it was also mentioned that this was first awarded, I think you said in 2021 is when the announcement came that Vacaville got it. So now this is 2024. If we take it back to the state and say, well, we want to phase it in, will you accept this? That's going to add more and more time when the shot clock is ticking. And it's difficult to be in a situation where the time is clicking and you say, well, I need to make a decision. But it's been a long time coming for this decision, and I feel personally that it's worth spending the money for the people and the future of Vacaville, so I am in support of this park.
Councilmember Silva?
Yeah, thank you. So just to put things in context, so I'm going back to, where's it at? Item F, no. Yeah, what is this? 6F, right? So right there, claims paid for the period total, $23 million. $23 million. $8 million is not going to save abundance amount of job. That's not going to get us through a month. So if we're at that particular point, we're in trouble. What this park is, it's not just a park. As you heard from the voices of our community, these letters that we have, folks that city has spent hours and hours going out to the community. My son, hey, bud, come out and can you come out to the meeting tonight and talk to this? Again, Dad? This has been going on since he was 8 years old. He's 14 now. This is over 6 years, providing feedback on something that he felt that we're here committed to making sure it happens. This isn't just a park. If we remove the Malaquias Montoya Community Center that has a kitchen, it becomes just a park. That particular facility allows folks, parents, people who are coming to this country, people who are trying to escape out of poverty, to be able to make pupusas for $2 or $3 to feed their family. Sorry, guys. It's not just a park. It's $7 million that can truly help transform people's lives, and not just a couple people, not just 3 or 4 letters, not just 3 or 4 families, but for generations to come. And this is something that will absolutely bring the well-being in a multitude of ways, but far beyond what we can even fathom. Because if anybody interacts with kids, you will know that they're some of the most creative, innovative individuals. And the people who stifle that innovation, creativity that's made this country great are us adults, and not allowing them to have the space and facilities to grow, to prosper, to create. And to me, obviously I'm a little passionate about this particular project, but I don't give a crap about me. I don't care about getting revoted. I don't care about not getting voted, get whatever, all that stuff. Like, I have options. I made it out. I think about all the kids I grew up with. Gail's not here no more, but I went to travel around with her, handed out food. A couple of those kids, they're struggling right now. They're not kids no more. They're struggling, homeless, fighting their own demons. And I think, to Jason's point, what if we had something more accessible there? Because the fact that matters, we were not welcome outside that neighborhood. And many times we weren't even welcome within there. And so most of it, just to take accountability, a lot of times that was our fault, just to put that out there. All right. But at the same time, you think about mentorship, the ability to connect different social services to folks who need it. We needed mentors. We needed fathers, and we had strong mothers, but we needed that guidance. And, I'm talking about a lot of deeper issues, but again, if you have no place to go, no place to convene, no place to build community, what are you supposed to do? Look at all the different barriers that are stacked upon you. And to me, this is not just a park. It's an opportunity for people, yes, to celebrate community, to celebrate culture that's welcome to all. That's why we called it the De Colores Park. That particular community center, again, has the opportunity to develop economic prosperity. That's something that can be ran through our Parks and Rec. I don't know if it's gonna generate back to $7 million, but damn, we just given out money earlier for mistakes that we made. This isn't a mistake. These folks aren't a mistake. They're worth the investment, and I look forward to saying yes. But I do need to make an amendment if we go that route. I need to amend the plan to include some type of electrical access or screen, but hoping to get outside funding to support that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Silva. And to be clear, I am not against this project or the park. Just to be very clear, I, in good conscience, cannot deficit spend and continue to fork out when Measure M, and I'm very familiar with it because I was part of the process. And yes, we are on a timeline because this is funding that's required, and so I get it. And so it puts pressure on us. Nobody anticipated that we were going to go from 6.7 million to 18.1. But in my life, if that was the case, I wouldn't do it because I couldn't afford it. And I just don't want to see us in 2 years say, well, we saw the fiscal cliff coming, and we have a detention basin that we haven't invested in, and now we have a plan. And that cost residents 15, 20 years ago over $20 million. So we potentially are gambling on money because of a good idea when there's others that could equally be in front of us in the very near future. And hope isn't a strategy. And so I'm not against the park. I want you to know that. I wholeheartedly
It's just a
feel
lower priority. We get it. We've heard it before. We get it. Respectfully, we get it. And it is economical decisions. And I respect you for that. So I don't want anybody coming after you or anything like that. I get it.
You know, it's just that I was here when we were ready to potentially close the doors on a lot of staff and couldn't make payroll. And so we're grateful for the residents that voted for Measure M. Grateful. And we've rebuilt the city to what it once was. That was 2011-12, and here we are in 2024. And we got a presentation that says it's going to be in the single digits in the next few years. We make sound decisions based on that. And so I feel that we're making an emotional decision, and I feel the emotion, and I'm just not willing to put the city at risk and jeopardize that. That's all. It's not that I'm against the program. Well,
Yes.
what,
Call for the question.
what question? Okay, there's still lights up, so I'll get to you, but I'll let you just a minute. So I just want to be cautious that if we're going to have to come back and ask for millions more because we need a detention basin, and there's people in this community that have lived through floods, where's that money going to come from? There is potentially some grants, but it doesn't cover all of it. There's a certain point where we run out of money, and I'm just trying to be fiscally responsible here, not trying to shut down something that could be a good program. That's all. And to be fair, let me check. Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the comments from the community, first of all. It's really passionate. And that kind of flowed over to the now both views of both kind of spirited conversations about this park. You know, Mike's passion really touched me. I really enjoyed the community talking. I really enjoyed Alicia Minion's education and history. I dug my own. But like Mike, I think I moved right above the area in 1989. And I remember when the park was brand new. And I remember literally having fights happen because you had a whole neighborhood trying to use one court. And sometimes we all didn't get along. I remember having one court, one place to play, and not everyone was friends back then. So I remember those moments. We talk now, really some people that we have lost or are in jail or in prison, we both knew. We both dodged that bullet. But it's amazing, it is opportunities. It's not just a park, it's a place. You know, idle minds will find things to do, and there's nothing to do. When I look at that community, it's barren. We can go back to history lesson, how redevelopment worked, where the properties were located, identified, how they were put in certain areas. I mean, it can be a very good history lesson one day we go down it, to realize how that neighborhood was built the way in which it was, how that agent purposely drove her around the neighborhood. It's because of redlining. My father was a real estate agent in the city back when there was Thomas guides, and they would literally draw where you could and could not live if you look like me and Mike. It's amazing how life works. Those days are gone. I'm very blessed with that. But some of the stuff from those days are still present in our community. And that's why that community looks like it does. It's been pushed and compressed and for decades passed over. It's not just a park, but I am very conscious aware of the fiscal problems, deficit, and the problems. But being in business, you always have expenses. We can't control everything. It's like a wave. We got to ride it and control the best we can do. We don't need to spend above our means but we're gonna have to sometimes, just make payroll every single month for the city. So I get it. There's no physical way for us to actually be fiscally responsible and have the zero deficit and zero deficit spending. We spend money every month. I'll take his advice. I think we should reach out to people at the park and Andrews Park. I was a kid when it burned down. I was a kid when it got rebuilt, and I grew up playing in it. Stuff happens. We need to look bigger. We should have community come out. We should have companies come out. We should have people come out. We should ask our friends. People would help. We'll close the gap. We'll find funding. We'll find grants, and it'll all work out. I'm very supportive of it.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, just to bring back some like financial pieces of it for this park. I understand the deficit spending, the projections that were presented by finance, but this park is pretty much now or never. So if we kick it down the road 6 years and hopefully the economy gets a little bit better, at that point we'll lose a grant, so it increases the cost of the park by 30%. And you're looking at conservatively maybe 3% inflation each year. That's conservative, is probably going to be a little bit more than that. So now you're looking at over 6 years, probably 25% increase. Now you're at 50% increase of the park, which is fully burdened by the city. At that point, nobody's going to spend $25 million on a park that at that point, if we have to bear the full cost of it. Yeah, there might be grants we can apply for by that point, but we don't know what the state of the state. And so if it doesn't get done now, it probably will never happen if you're looking at pure numbers. And yeah, we get like the city's deficit spending, but it also has a possibility to generate a little bit of income to offset it. If we're truly worried about bringing more income, people show up almost every meeting asking for cannabis that is passed by the city on the tax for it. You know, that comes with its own issues and doesn't generate as much as we'd hope it'd generate, but it is a source of revenue that we can pull in if we are truly worried about the state of the city and the finances coming in. There are means of revenue that could come in that the community already approved in the past. So yeah, there's lots of different ways we can look at it. We can bring in what I've talked about numerous times up here, is bringing in some Lean Six Sigma folks from process improvement to see, hey, there's always chance for improvement, to see where we can make things more efficient. Like, hey, we spend too much time on this, or is there excess funds going out to someplace else that we can look at? The training is not expensive. I mean, I did a lot of mine for almost free. And so if we're looking at ways to improve and save money, there's a lot of ways out there we can do that are creative. But if we don't get this park through soon, it will probably never happen in that area. And like was brought up numerous times, that area has been overlooked numerous times in the 80s and 90s, early 2000s. And so it's already been kicked down the road so many different times that we do got to put our foot down and actually stick to what we said.
All right, seeing no lights. Councilmember Stockton.
Yeah, just one question. How much is the Trower redevelopment going to cost? I'm just curious.
Park?
The park renovations, yeah, for Trower that we should have approved today, but we didn't. I'm just curious, the total amount. I'd like to know.
So the reason it's not on today is because it wasn't part of the agenda and it's a separate item. But what was approved in the augmentation budget earlier this year was a total of up to $3.2 million.
Councilmember Silva.
Until we see the Markham neighborhood as part of Vacaville, we're going to continue to have those type of questions. We need to stop looking at things as districts and different neighborhoods, and we all have to look at us as one community, one city, the city of Vacaville. Earlier today, we saw the city of Vacaville come together to celebrate and honor the life of a father who, of 2 kids we'll never know, and another young man. We have to start looking at all of us as one, not how much what certain area gets or whatnot, or who has what and who does, what doesn't. It's easy to do. I've done it, but we have to challenge ourselves to look at all of us as one.
Can I make a motion? Councilmember Silva, with all due respect.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, with all due respect, I mean.
The reason why I ask is because this park is less than a mile away from that park.
That's right.
And I live in a community in Northville. I want you to have this park. I want to phase it in.
It's not me.
Well, no, I want everyone to have the park, but your district to have the park. I want to phase it in. Okay, well, here's what I'm saying. There are several parks that are in the queue that aren't getting $11 million to get their parks built. There are several parks that have the communities that pay the fees that go to those parks. It gets allocated to the city fund to renovate other parks. So all I'm saying is, I want to see your project not change at all, but I think it is a mistake to not try and phase it and maximize the funds. This is not about whether or not we should do Trower Park and that, but we do only have so much money, and the money is going to come from a source with the city. That's all I'm saying.
And just one comment, this in general. I think where we need to move forward as a city is if we're going to be cautious about how we spend money, we need to move on stuff when we approve it. I mean, just straight up. Like, Trower Park was approved 3 years ago. Those baseball lights that we were talking about, that was a 3-year-long process, right? So the reality is, if we really cared about money, we would make things move, and we would figure out, give the staff support what they got to do to make our process much more efficient, to be more favorable to small businesses, so they're not going back and forth for several months just to get their doors open, and making things more economical to where now we can get the revenue that they want to pay to do business in our city.
I agree with that too.
And I just want to make a comment, Councilmember Silva. In no way do I want anyone to perceive that what I'm trying to do is divide us. I really am not. There are processes the way our government works. We have a Parks and Rec Commission. We have plans for other parks, and what Councilmember Stockton just said is true. And so there is a passion, and I sense it. If this was not an ask of a significant amount, and it was falling within the grant, and had we gotten there before everything got expensive, I think everyone was believing this is a great idea. But at what point do we say, when we look at things, do we say that maybe we need to rethink how much we spend? That's the reason why Trower Park's not here. It's because when the bids are too high, we have to stop as a city just saying, let's just keep spending more money. So I'm simply making a statement that I would absolutely love to see it there. I just can't, in good faith, knowing everything else, to say that. I don't want this to ever be perceived that there's an upper tier. It doesn't prioritize to people, because safety of people is important too. And so neither one of us have to be wrong or right in this. I'm just conveying what my feelings are on this. And I see that there are other challenges that we're facing, that's all. But if you want to go ahead and make the motion, I'll let you make the motion.
I just need some advice from whomever. The stage in itself, it needs to have a couple more things. I'm not going to advocate that we pay for funds out of additional funds of that. I have permission to say I'm in talks with other companies that have interest, and they're looking to see, based on what our decision is tonight, on how to pursue conversations with staff for additional funding. So if there is an option, so what I would like to see in addition to this, if it's approved, that we have electrical access to that stage and a LED screen with some type of covering to live stream events, something to that effect. Does that need to be, I'd like that to be included in this motion tonight. Is that an appropriate place? Is this an appropriate place to do that so we can have those conversations, or staff can have those conversations?
Thank you, Councilmember. So I would suggest that, because if the council proceeds to move forward with the approval of the funding for this park project, my recommendation would be that this project would then follow the process of going through the city's Parks and Rec Commission, which would review, evaluate, work with our Parks and Rec staff, our Public Works Department on all those details. Because this has kind of been a very finite, project, I would, suggest that you make that as a suggestion or a request, that if we can find a way to include that, wire it, program it for a future, whatever, that can be part of the discussion between staff and the Planning and the Parks and Rec Commission going forward as to whether or not that can be incorporated into design, so that we can hear your request and see if there's an opportunity going forward.
Okay, so I motion to approve 9A with the suggestion that staff please pursue the enhancement of that stage, in addition to taking the most cost-effective way to save our taxpayer dollars to ensure that, ensuring that this project is completed by the deadline.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion, and Richie seconds it. Roll call.
Councilmember Stockton?
Because we're not even going to try to phase the project, my vote is no, but I do support the project in phases.
Councilmember Chapman? Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ritchie?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Mayor Carley?
No. Motion passes, so move forward. And appreciate the spirited debate. The goal is not for it to be personal, and I hope that it isn't. We all have our reasons and our motives, but it's always good to be clear and understanding so that we're not misunderstood. So with that, we will move on to the next item. Item C.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. The final item tonight is the final update and closeout of the City of Vacaville's COVID-19 economic recovery strategy. Don Burris, our Director of Economic Development Services, and Dr. Robert Idler are here for that update.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Don Burris, Director of Economic Development Services here. The purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide the City Council with an update on the city's economy 3 years after the implementation of the COVID-19 economic recovery strategy. So there is no action required on the council this evening. The action simply is to receive the information. By way of background, in February of 2021, the City Council adopted the Vacaville COVID-19 Economic Recovery Strategy. The strategy consisted of two main objectives. One, which was the implementation of short-term and long-term strategies to lessen the impacts of COVID-19 on the business community. And two, to create a strategic focus by understanding the impact of the city's economic centers that drive economic activity. The strategy was developed and implemented in collaboration with the city's economic development partners, which are Downtown Vacaville Business Improvement District, the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce, Visit Vacaville, the Solano-Annapolis Small Business Development Center, and the Solano County Workforce Development Board. The consultant team at Chabin Concepts prepared a final report to close out the strategy and share the economic progress the city has made as a result of implementing the strategy. At the time the strategy was written, many economists and business analysts believed that it would take approximately 3 years for cities and industries to recover from the negative impact and effects related to the pandemic. Recovery was defined as an economy that would bounce back to 2019 levels of economic activity. Presenting this evening is Dr. Robert Idler, President of Economic Forensics and Analytics. Dr. Idler has been an excellent resource because of his unique expertise in economic development and forensic documentation. He will be presenting this evening's final update. Dr. Idler.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Mayor and City Council, and I want to thank Don specifically in sort of shepherding this process and being a link for us to the city, and Chabin for asking me to do this, and the city staff for also being a partner on this. So what I want to do is I want to start by giving a little bit of more detail to the major parts of the recovery strategy. One was trying to understand where the disruption would happen and track that progress. We'll talk more about the data on that tracking that progress in just a second. And thinking about the area or the city in sort of manageable areas and trying to prioritize where funding would go, where resources would go, and trying to guide the city out of the problems in the sort of broader context of how things were evolving from 2021 forward. Trying to create actions along these three business drivers, and Don, if you have one more click, you can see those three drivers here. The way that Chabin and I kind of think about the local economies, we think there's a sector that focuses primarily on goods and services that are sold outside the local areas. Visitor-oriented services are sort of alongside of that and also focused on bringing income in from the outside. Locally serving is also providing those services to the local residents, and the mix of those and really the centerpiece when you have good economic recovery, all three of those are working in sync. And so the idea of trying to understand where displacement would take place and ultimately trying to put a recovery strategy together was really thinking about that sort of three-legged stool where if all three legs rose as one, the city economy would remain balanced. One of the problems that came along, however, was inflation. So I wanted to add this graph briefly to show you the evolution of prices, at least from one viewpoint. This is the Federal Reserve's favorite price index. It's called Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Prices. And in essence, what it is that it's the evolution of what we buy every month at home in terms of a percentage change from looking back 12 months and what's happened since January 2007. If you notice, most of the time before, let's say, mid-2021, prices remain relatively stable around that blue dotted line. The blue solid line is that percentage change evolution over that time period. The blue dotted line is where the Federal Reserve wants it to go. So when it thinks about interest rates, when the blue solid line goes above the blue dotted line, we start thinking about rate increases. When it goes below, we start thinking about rate cuts. So you can see how much it surged after that second gray skinny area, which is the time of the COVID-19 recession, and how it's been slowly coming down and then speeding up a little bit more over the last 12 months in terms of the devolution of inflation. But if Dawn, click one more time, please, I'm sorry. That shaded area where those red dots are is the current forecast in terms of where those dots were, or where that line was meant to go over the next 3 years at the end of the year. So the good thing is that we've actually seen inflation come back. And inflation was probably the #1 problem for both small businesses and also our lower to middle income households in Vacaville and really throughout California and the United States. And seeing that come down is a good thing. One more click. So the things to consider when you think about inflation, how that might lead to a forecast and where we're going in Vacaville from this point forward is one, when rate cuts come, it's going to be because the Federal Reserve believes they've done their job. So one of the things a lot of businesses and a lot of residents are waiting on is wanting to see interest rates fall, and it gives them some credit cost relief. Go ahead, another click, I'm sorry. And if it continues to beat that forecast, if that blue line continues to go down, and you're going to one more click, you're going to see that difference. We will see rate cuts this year. There's been a lot of evolution of whether or not interest rate cuts were coming. But if you think about the broader context and what we're going to talk about next is coming over the next few years, a lot of it's going to be focused on where interest rates are going and where ultimately the economy is going to go under whatever political regime we get in Washington and beyond once November 6th hits us. So thinking about this context and what's been happening, one of the things we did is we sort of worked with Don and the team to think about actions to take. There's financial support programs took place, policy changes, business support initiatives, business retention outreach, and a bunch of sector-specific plans with the idea. We looked at the data and said what sectors of the economy were the ones that were going to be most important to preserving two things. One is Vacaville's niche regionally, and second, where most of the income is generated in this community. The next stop is to look at thinking about tracking recovery. So what was happening with workforce development? What's happening with infrastructure investment? How are you looking at industry diversification, not only what diverse industries are still there and what might be devolving or evolving in a relatively dynamic economic environment, but then thinking about where you're going to be not now, but 5 or 10 years from now. And that's one of the things that when you're in a crisis mode, you've got to be thinking, when we consider strategy, we know kind of what we do well, but we have to think about what economic forces are going to be on those industries in such a way that we might see change, regardless of all the effort we do, it's still going to pull and push 5 or 10 years from now. Life sciences or biotechnology is one of those industries that we've seen a lot of convolution over the last 20 years. And once the pandemic hit, there was a lot of concern that we'd see more consolidation and not necessarily bets made by that industry in smaller suburban areas that actually had developed some niche, Vacaville being one of those areas. We also want to look at some metrics. So with that in mind, we built a recovery dashboard. And the first stop we looked at was the evolution of jobs. And this is meant for I'm viewing on a computer, so it's a little hard to see at distance. But the point of this is to look at what's happening with Vacaville's residents. So the top line are the number of people who live in Vacaville that are either looking for work or currently working. We call that the labor force. Folks that live in Vacaville that have a job is the second line, and the distance between those two lines, which is a gray shaded area, are the unemployed. And so you can see, do 2 more clicks, I'm sorry. You're going to see that in Vacaville on the left-hand side and Solano County as a comparative overall on the right-hand side. There was a really quick cut after 2020, so these data are basically from February 2020 forward to the end of last year, and then we started to close down the pandemic-related look at the evolution of Vacaville's economy. But Vacaville bounced back a little bit more quickly than the county did on average, which was great. Y'all were set up in a way that, based on the way that the pandemic and the economy moved in 2021 forward, Vacaville moved a little bit faster than places like Fairfield or Vallejo did, and thus it kind of pulled the county a little faster than would have happened otherwise, and the county kind of came from behind Vacaville, which is good. You can see as of May 2024, I just added this because the latest data just came out, we're at about 3.8% unemployment in Vacaville, or that distance has gotten a little bit smaller than the county, which is currently at 4.4%. The other thing we wanted to look in terms of jobs was jobs by industry, and this is also a little tricky to see at distance, but the point behind this, and Don, just do one more click, I think it'll come up, is that there were winners in terms of thinking, well, where were we after the pandemic shock happened? You kind of see in each one of those bars, what these are sectoral level jobs in Vacaville. The tall ones are looking left to right, construction, manufacturing, retail, and then jumping to where the real tall one is, right before that is private education, then healthcare and nonprofit / public health is that really tall set of columns, and then it's events, hotel and restaurants, an amalgam of other personal services, and then government. The winners in that group are really healthcare, logistics and transportation, manufacturing, construction. For Vacaville, that's where we saw the growth. Ones that are still struggling are in retail, hotels and restaurants, that's okay. Farming, for better or for worse. I come from a farm family, so I'm always concerned about what's happening with farming, and then in education. That's where we're still looking, but Vacaville's not necessarily unique in that struggle in those industries. It's something, if you look at California, it's very similar. So the one thing that's good about Vacaville, there's nothing from an industrial standpoint that suggests there's been a shock, that Vacaville basically hasn't moved toward recovery where the state has moved faster. Vacaville has actually been a decent microcosm of the state and moved faster in a couple different ways. This is another look at that. This is incomes generated in the three major sectors we looked at before. The gray area is the traded sector, which is going to be primarily agriculture, construction, and manufacturing. The less green area is the locally serving industries, and then the top gray area is visitor services. So visitor services actually expanded a little bit, while we saw sort of this movement between what we think of as the traded sector and locally serving industries and their income generation over the last few years. However, inflation, and this is why I showed you inflation initially, has really ground growth down in Vacaville in terms of what happens after inflation. So these numbers are inflation adjusted, and we want to think about that because if I give somebody a wage, which is really one of the major ways in which income is generated by a local business and then finds its way to local residents, is always affected by inflation or the purchasing power that you receive from that wage. So there has been nominal growth of income, but inflation unfortunately has eroded that to a certain extent, and that's why that arrow sort of shows this slow slip down the line. California's got the same problem, for better or for worse. Inflation has just simply outpaced the generation of income, at least over the last few years. Go ahead. So we always want to think of those three. That's why we have those three sectors on this graph. Go ahead. Thank you. And like I said earlier, those challenges are in those industries. The next stop is taxable sales. So if we looked at this dashboard on taxable sales 3 years ago, we would see a lot of those columns moving up rather than down. The last year has been a little tough. Part of that's because we've seen a slow downturn in visitor spending and visitor movement around California. We've seen more travel abroad over the last year than we did in 2021 and 2022. This year looks like it's going to be about the same as last year. But one of the groups to look at, which is that is a big green column going down, is other retail. Other retail is where we ended up sort of pushing online taxable sales. And as we've seen consumers pull back, one place where they've pulled back relatively quickly is actually buying stuff online. They've curbed that back. Another victim of inflation. So when we think about taxable sales, we usually don't report taxable sales as inflation adjusted, but we should be thinking about the effects of inflation on how local merchants are able to sell goods and services, how they're being patronized by visitors and residents, and what the outlook is in terms of if you now stack the economy on top of an inflated economy, or sorry, a slowing economy on top of one in which has already faced inflation. There's a lot of challenges out there for your local merchants, but we wanted to track this and make sure we were watching what's happening in Vacaville with respect to specific merchant categories. So like I said, those things are going to be reversing for a bunch of different reasons. Most of the reversal from last year, and these data are the third quarter of last year looking back 1 year. That's where we started to slow down our look at the pandemic-related economy. A lot of that change is in inflation starting to slow down, reducing prices, but also the consumer slowing their spending. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next stop was housing. So one of the major reasons why you have local inflation is because of housing prices going up, which will then lead over into rental prices rising. The first panel is a comparison of median home price at a bunch of different places. Vacaville is the first stop, looking at 1 year, which barely moved over this time period, which is basically the calendar year 2023. And you can see, though, that it was positive over the 2 years, where San Francisco, as a comparative, has been negative basically since the pandemic. So Vacaville's housing market has sort of trucked along at a pretty decent pace, about the same as the county overall. But one of the nasty little parts about having housing prices continue to rise, even if it's 2 or 3%, is it compounds your wealth if you're a homeowner, but it also compounds the distance between a current renter and actually getting into a home if they want to be a homeowner. That can affect the way that residents think about staying here, which then can affect labor force choice for your local employers. And so that's kind of the juxtaposition of how housing prices now and in the future can affect other parts of the economy and sort of tilt those legs of that economic development stool. The second panel is the 1 year forecast as of December 2023, looking forward 1 year. All those you can see on the axis, hopefully you can read that. Of those comparison areas here in Solano County and also the state of California at that time, there really was nothing above 1% growth, but they are all positive. So we had some relatively negative negative forecasts about housing let's say 24 months ago. They actually were a little bit more pessimistic than what was reality, and then the forecasters kind of adjusted a little bit and hedged that this year would be relatively flat. Thus far, it's actually been a little bit positive, but not quickly positive. So we will see how that plays out. But it's just another thing to watch in terms of how much more pressure there is, but also how much more stability there is for current homeowners. This is the current forecast at the macroeconomic level. I'll run you through this relatively quickly because this will tee up where you want to think about where things are going for Vacaville. Every quarter, the Philadelphia Federal Reserve asks 40 forecasters their viewpoint on the macroeconomy, and I pull 3 variables out of that forecast. This is from May 2024. So that's when you see the new columns are from 1 quarter ago, given where we are today. Go ahead, Don, click one more. And one more, please. That's where we are in terms of real GDP growth, or where think of that as income after inflation as a percentage change. So if you look at that shaded area, which is the latest forecast, and look at the column next to it that's labeled previous, these forecasters actually were a little bit more optimistic about the macroeconomy, the US economy, than they were just 1 quarter before for this year and next, a little bit less optimistic for 2026. But those numbers are all kind of floating around pre-pandemic growth levels, and thus there are no recessions out there really by any of the major forecasters in the United States for the US economy. And it's very hard, short of a major employer leaving an area, for a local area to recess outside of a national or state recessionist context. So this is good news in terms of the macro look. It's a slower moving economy than we've seen over the last couple of years, but it's one that looks like it's going to somehow sort of soft land given all the convolution. And if you hear that idea called soft landing, the idea there is that we are not going to have recession, even though the Federal Reserve has kind of gone through this upswing in rate cycle and is now looking to bring it back down. If we can go through the down cycle in rates without having a recession, that's a so-called soft landing. The next stop is unemployment. One of the main reasons why we have not had a second declared recession and we don't see one is because the labor market remains relatively strong. The caveat there, it's primarily because we've had a lack of people coming back in the labor force vis-a-vis the demand for labor. So that balancing act between supply and demand looks like it's going to stay relatively stable for the next few years. And for the so-called core PCE inflation, those are the same numbers we saw in the red dots in the graph before when we saw inflation. So as I said before, there's no recession currently out there, which provides at least a decent context looking forward, but those growth rates are relatively slow. So in looking forward and kind of transitioning between pandemic planning and strategy and sort of forward looking for Vacaville, Chabin is recommending the following ideas. One, you got to leverage strengths. So we want to think about how can you market Vacaville as a place to do business looking forward, and how can you sort of maintain and expand economic diversification. You don't want to become a one or two trick pony. Even if those ponies are relatively good ones, it's a very competitive marketplace out there. And you also need to think about regional collaboration. Solano County, I've been working in Solano County off and on for about 20 years. And one of the trickiest things to do, even though we've been talking about it for 20 years of regional collaboration, is to actually get the 7 cities in one lane. And now we're thinking about an 8th city, and we'll see how that goes. We want to think about mitigating challenges. One is we've seen an increased cost of doing business. So even if inflation is floating down, you still have a compounding effect from years of relatively high inflation building on each other. And small businesses see that as much as we see that as residents in the grocery store. They're going to affect each other over time. There's going to be rising competition. You need to think about visitors and niche. It's become a more competitive marketplace. The one reason why we've seen a slower change this year and also last year in terms of visitors to Vacaville and really around California generally is because other places have started to put deals together to draw those visitors back. Things like going to Japan now because the yen has fallen in value. People are willing to do long haul travel because they're getting that offset in savings. This is also true last year in terms of Europe. So we're watching in California to see how close to the forecast we get, but we are expecting a relatively slower year, but not drastically slower. But it's something to watch in terms of an ongoing challenge, as well as a slower moving economy and the political uncertainty we currently face. We will see just getting to November 6th and where we are. So, and at the end, the idea is to really focus on the strategic opportunities. And this is really the key thing looking forward. Continue to build on life sciences and really make sure that Vacaville keeps that niche. Workforce alignment with employers. As people come and go from Vacaville, how much are they looking at Vacaville as a place to do work? And how much are employers locally looking to hire people that live in Vacaville, because then you're capturing all that economic activity. Solano County is a place that has historically had people leave to go to work and go other places, and that pressure will still be there as a drumbeat, but it's something to watch for Vacaville, because Vacaville is in kind of a unique geography of really being able to touch Sacramento Valley and the Bay Area more than any other place of any size in Solano County. Commercial real estate will remain a challenge for the next few years. This is something to watch in terms of those sort of slow but steady rising vacancy rates and what that might mean in the medium to long term for the values of commercial real estate and other pressures that are sort of above and beyond the local ones. Thinking about downtown as a place, and you guys have had some of this debate tonight with the parks and where you're going next. Part of that's sort of a broader picture about placemaking and how you want to sort of live, work, and play in the same place. And then in making those quality of life investments, however you see that. Those are some things when you want to focus on the strategic opportunities looking forward. So with that, I'm looking forward to your questions, and thanks for the work.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I believe this requires no action, but it certainly has been nice to get these updates, and it's nice knowing that there are individuals like you that study this who can help us as we forecast the future. And, there's a few lights on here, but again, I just want to say that when we're trying to forecast and make good decisions, there's no doubt that people's spending has been harmed because of inflation. And that trickles into the local business when they're not being patronized as much. And that's something that we do here. So, Councilmember Silva.
Thank you for the overview. We always appreciate you presenting and give us the rundown. We have a lot of restaurants in our town, particularly in our downtown. Some of them struggling pretty substantially. What kind of, I know you're looking at more of a relatively macroeconomic level, but what are some certain tools that maybe enhance or can help support those businesses to kind of get through this trough?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two things about restaurants, and really hasn't changed that much short of minimum wage legislation, putting a little bit more cost pressure on restaurants, because even though it is relatively large fast food restaurants that had the most focal change, that will filter into other related labor markets. So don't think it's just going to be just hyper-focused on that when the market actually plays itself out. It's trying to be flexible about how restaurants are going to do business, inside, outside, hours. the way that parking needs to work, just thinking about how to support those local businesses. And the second is trying to also think about how through economic development you can put package deals together, because if you can generate more than one reason to come to some place where a meal is part of that, it can drive more dollars left here and really get out to a broader audience. So thinking about package deals where everybody shares in the revenue and it maybe makes the total experience slightly less expensive, but the revenue comes rather than goes some other place. You're seeing a little bit of that happen, specifically in places like Napa, because Napa suddenly has now become more competitive too. They kind of grew so fast and kind of thought it wasn't going to end, and now that it's starting to cap off, $900, $1,000 a night is now not selling as well as it used to, and so now they're ratcheting back and trying to figure out how I can sort of maintain some balance, and they're starting to look at partnerships between restaurants, hotels, and events. Those are things to consider.
Thank you.
Of course.
Councilmember Wiley.
Thanks for the information. Could you go back to slide 7? And I just wanted to ask basically the question, because it looks like at the end, you know, we're going down, down, down. So, but if you look at even where the 23X estimate is down, it's still higher than we were in 2018.
Yes.
And is that just because the town has grown so much more, or is there something else that accounts for that? Because it doesn't look like, well, maybe that's not such a cause for alarm, but we have a lot more businesses and a lot more people.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and thank you for that question. It's the key to this is the recognition that two things have happened. One is that the base of business and income has gone up from where it was, let's say, 5 years ago, but that inflation has had this sort of slow erosion effect on what you gain from the business. So you've had the growth of the base, and every year it grows, and economies naturally want to grow, no matter if they're city or national economies. But that slow flattening is mainly because of inflation wanting to redistribute how that income works in terms of what you retain from it. So a good observation that it's bigger than it was, and it remains that way. The idea is that if inflation was not as high, you probably would have had more overall income in this community that's kept and actually turns into purchasing power.
All right. And then I had one other question just on housing, because you commented that it looks like it's going up a little bit, but is that mostly new builds or is it sales of existing properties? Because like I see a lot of new sales going on that are still out of the reach of Solano County people. It's a lot of people coming from outside the county that are buying those houses. I think that still drives it up.
Yeah, so housing, as complex as we want to make it, is really almost a classic supply and demand game. If you build nothing and you got a lot of people who want to live there, if a house goes up for sale and there's 17 people that want to buy it, that's going to slowly start pumping up prices over time. So what a lot of communities are struggling with is how many units to build given two items. One is, will people have some burnout, or are they kind of locked in on mortgages where they're not necessarily going to demand new housing or even existing ones when they go up? And that's part of the reason we've seen sort of a flattening effect in prices and not 15, 20% year-on-year compounding growth in housing markets, is that you had some fatigue and the cost of credit went up, and the coupling of that slowed down demand. At the same time, communities have been reticent to build at least in California, this is not necessarily true in places like Arizona, Florida, Texas, where we've seen an enormous number of single-family homes built because the supposition was you'd see an inbound migrating population that was going to come with no end. That is actually starting to ebb, and as it ebbs, those housing markets are starting to falter a little faster than California's. But for California, 15 years from now, we're still going to talk about how housing's a problem because we're not building as fast as we have demand, and so we've got that price friction we talked about earlier. That even if you're preserving your housing wealth, you are not necessarily providing opportunity for renters to become homeowners, and that's something that will be a socio-political and socioeconomic issue for decades to come.
And one thing we seem to be furthering, because we're having a lot more rental building now than we've ever had before.
And one of the things to think about with multifamily building is that you are preparing for an economy that will maybe want to rent more than own because you build units for that. But most of California, at least I shouldn't say it that way, that's probably a little too much hyperbole, or not too much hyperbole, I'm sorry. It's better to say that California right now is basically forecasted to build about 50-50 split with single family versus multifamily, but we built more multifamily in the 2010s. So the inventory of multifamily has gone up, which means we're preparing for an economy that's more likely to rent than own. But what it's done is it's preserved wealth, and the shadow effect of the Great Recession still remains in housing markets, especially on the municipal and developer sides. Municipalities are very concerned about overbuilding single family because they don't want to perpetuate another round of problems if in fact we start to see housing markets generally sag.
Thank you.
Of course.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. I was actually, thank you, Chair. Sorry, my voice. That's okay. Wiley, for that. That number is always interesting. I appreciate your report. It's actually, I could talk to you all night about the 4.1 and 4.2 number. Jerome Powell just talked about that today. So on Friday, the whole BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the way they do the birth death rate, how they do it, it's a total scam. Every month they revise about 300,000 jobs, and he's probably gonna do it on Friday. So if you're estimating 4.1, we're probably expecting 4.2 on Friday, which is gonna push Jerome Powell to say September to lower rates, which will help all of us out. So you're right on with your data. But the hard part is about that, 1720, it's not, we always default to ownership, but we're turning into a renter's nation, and California is a renter state. Some cities are 60% rent, 40% ownership, and it's shifting fast. That number of creation, that's creation of housing units, which is an equation of both rental multifamilies and SFRs. Like, that always really frustrates me when I see like that clump, because people think, oh, a lot of families are able to buy homes. You're creating 500 units at a time, 1,000 units at a time, and you're creating these, that goes in that same number. The amount of homes people can afford is dwindling really fast. So it's hard when we see that data without that kind of clarification. We think, oh, people are coming to Vacaville and buying homes. No, people are coming to Vacaville and barely own afford rent. And they're buying homes too. And it's not a 50-50 equation. We've seen a shift also in California where multifamilies and SFRs, you're seeing about half the SFRs are being built to rent. So you need to touch on that. It's very scary.
No, thank you for saying it. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And it's just, it's hard. And like, we look, the same people that are building the homes are also they're de-incentivizing people to own because they make more money on rent. And so it's starting to become a very weird tragedy where the people we expect to help us buy homes and afford homes in our communities are building homes for you to rent, and they're de-incentivizing you to own. So there's a lot going on, but that number really needs to be broken down to understand where we are.
Agreed. Thank you for saying that.
I'm going to open up to the public for any comment. Then I'll bring it back to the council, and just want to thank you for all your efforts in helping us understand this very difficult series of years, but it certainly does help simplify a very complex issue. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any reports from the city manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And in advance, I apologize to the council because I'm probably going to steal a little bit of your thunder. But I feel it's important to share some information with you and our community about what's occurred, and to also acknowledge the amazing work of our team. In my long tenured career, what happened over the past week and a half has been one of the toughest things I've ever had to deal with. We lost 2 members of our team, our family, beginning with Officer Matt Bowen on July 11th, followed by Code Enforcement Technician Brian Nadasny on Friday, July 12th. In the past 4 days, I have had the privilege to attend the services for both these young men who were taken away from us much too young. But the positive, and there will be a lot said about these gentlemen. There was at those services, and I won't, get into repeating it. But, my heart goes out to both families, and my thoughts and prayers are with you. But I also want to say that yet again, I'm amazed, amazed by the capacity of our team to respond in a crisis. What I saw these past 4 days is incredible. The outpouring from the community is also incredible. This is truly an amazing community. And I can't say enough about the service that took place on Saturday, and then, of course, today's service. Thank you to everybody that worked on that. I know the police department put in countless hours and had lots and lots of help behind the scenes from a lot of different agencies who I will be thanking individually myself because of all the outpouring of support. But I just want to acknowledge our police department and all the efforts that went into that, and our media team. If you saw that video, our media team put that together, and if you haven't seen it, bring lots of tissue. With that said, I've got Corey to pull up a slide for me. If anybody's interested in watching the service, including the procession and the amazing outpouring and showing of support, please go to this website. You can see anything and everything that occurred today with regards to that. So again, thank you for Team Vacaville. You truly amaze me every time I see you in a crisis, and it's my pleasure and my privilege to be your teammate. On a lighter note, I've got to say it, Emily, thank you so much for all your service. I have been in your job, I have done your job, and I know how hard your job is. And you have done it with compassion and passion, and this community is much better for you being here. And we will sorely miss you, but I wish you the best, and thank you for all your years of service. So thank you. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
And thank you. We'll move on to reports of the City Council. I too also want to pass along my just gratitude and appreciation for our community, our staff. It's been a very difficult time for so many people. It's been devastating. But today was so honoring for a life that was cut short. And to hear just the amazing stories of this young man, Officer Bowen, and to know the family that he leaves behind. We saw it today. I heard some comments, and a lot of us have been through the grieving process. It's very, very difficult. The different phone calls, the different locations that I have found myself in. And the perseverance and resilience of a staff because of so much support. And you saw it in all the community and all the businesses that came out today. And for that, I am deeply in this community's debt. I heard another comment, not today, but in this last week, and it was probably during a period of grief. It's like, why does it take a tragedy to bring a community together? And I reflected on it, and I realized the community is already together. It just was the tragedy that brought everyone together in one place. This community is very strong. It really is. And I am so just filled with gratitude to be part of this city and the people that call Vacaville home. I've said Vacaville is not just a place, it's a feeling. And if you didn't feel it today, you weren't in our community because it was everywhere. And I'm sure there'll be more stories to tell, and we could be here all night and for both of them. And I just, it was moving to drive through the community and to see everyone waving the flags and holding up signs and showing their appreciation. Even all the agencies, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that, the city of Fairfield has patrolled the streets. They're patrolling the streets right now. The sheriff's office is conducted along with the comm center, so is Fairfield. Oakland PD, you just named the police department. Everyone wants to help, and it just shows you just how much people want to be part of something that was so painful. But the one takeaway I had today was just a reminder in Matthew Bowen's life is he lived with a smile on his face and always being kind. It was one story after another of kindness. And we'd be a better place if everyone could just live by the motto that was his life, and we'll never forget him. And so tonight we will be closing and adjourning our council meeting. Not yet, but when we do, it will be in honor of Officer Matthew Bowen. and also with Bryden Adasdy. Bryden, his father was Vincent Adasdy, and he worked for the City of Vacaville Police Department for many years. And I think I know where just that sense of kindness in people, in our staff and our community. But it was really hard because we lost, Vince within the last 2 years, and only to see in the fire department within 24 hours to have their own grieving process. And we lost heroes. We really did. We could be here all night, but we won't. So I'm going to move on a couple other things just so that we understand. There's certainly California Forever. This isn't going away. I am pleased that at least at this point, there's a process that really looks into an EIR, looks at what a development agreement looks like. It allows for a process, and I think that that's really the best way forward. And I appreciate the public's comments over time. They're not lost on us, even if at times it seems like the council or your elected officials were either writing op-eds or they weren't saying anything. It doesn't mean that things weren't being said and done behind the scenes. And lastly, tomorrow night there's an opportunity for the community to come together in a different way, and that is there's going to be a piece of art that is going to have a celebration. It's Touch the Sky, and it's at 7:30. It'll be on the Main Street Bridge, and you can't miss it if you were to walk into Andrews Park. But I want to thank Leslie Silver with the downtown bid. She had contacted me with this idea, and it just seemed like a really good idea to bring art to our downtown, to have a place where people can come and to sit at this Touch the Sky, which is while it's on the bridge. The artist will be there, Martin Taylor, so you'll have an opportunity to meet the artist and also enjoy some light refreshments in the downtown music right there in the square. Come out tomorrow night and let's show our support for downtown and our community. And I think that I'm going to go to Sarah Chapman, Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you. I ditto the comments made by our city manager and the mayor. So we'll move on. I wanted to share that and ask really of my colleagues. As you know, I sit really, and now I'm chairing the Citizens Advisory Committee at the prisons. We had a meeting just a week ago, and they are doing such marvelous, just wonderful things for the inmates to get them prepared and skilled upon their release. Hopefully it will change their lives. However, I want to make mention that they have a Delancey Street there on the grounds. I've had a few of us have been able to have a meal there. It is outstanding. They are looking into doing more out in the community with that. And so along with the Delancey Street, the education program, it's monumental what they have accomplished and what they are doing. So I want to ask if it's possible to invite them to do a presentation to the council on how we are presently partnering with them, the opportunities there is for the community as well. And I think you'd just be very, very impressed and say, yes, there's more that we can do even with the work that they have and are accomplishing. So is it okay if I ask the city manager to bring them in to do a presentation?
Yeah, we can, if we had, because we are in partnership with them, there's no reason that we can't get some form of an update. Obviously you sit there, but no different than at times I've had the Solano County Water Agency come and do a presentation because we're working with them.
Right. I appreciate that.
Request for that.
And then
They got to bring that cheesecake to make. I'm hoping that the gentleman that perfected his recipe is moved on to new opportunities,
Culinary
but
opportunities.
hopefully left his recipe behind because.
And if any of you are interested, even in the community, if you're interested in going, I mean, it's open to the public. Just have to contact them and provide your contact information, and they'll clear you, and we can go in and have a lunch there on the grounds. It is amazing, the skills that they have gained. The other thing I want to share is I've been attending the youth I'm going to call them the Youth Roundtable meetings. And right now, they're in the process of planning their youth summit. So I want to put that out there. So if you receive a phone call asking for assistance, just remember you have district funds, and these children represent all of us. I mean, they're from throughout the city. The international youth. Councilmember Stockton and I were able to throw out the first ball at the international tournament on Friday. It was fun, very hot. Oh my gosh, was it hot. But I got my ball to the plate.
Perfect strike. Me not so much.
It was fun. You got your ball there as well, just a little off to the side.
Catcher had a great glove.
Okay, and the other thing I was going to ask the mayor to consider, but I was hoping that we were going to have that presentation this evening on the homeless site, even though it was for informational purposes. But following that, depending upon the comments, I was going to ask about the possibility of having a homeless committee. And I would like to serve on that committee because of the amount of money that is budgeted here in Vacaville alone to serve the homeless. And there are so many people and agencies and churches in the area that are doing wonderful things. The outreach that they're doing for them, just to bring us together and just talk about, hear from the perspective, what's going on.
Well, and just hearing the comments tonight, what I would say is that, to be clear, we were about to have the city conducting its meeting and reporting out, and it was canceled because of all that we've been through. So that's still going to be rescheduled, I'm sure, sometime soon. So let's get through that.
Okay.
There is a homeless roundtable that is community-driven that has already started. Clearly, the ability for city staff to attend and communicate and work, no different than they did in the past, especially trying to understand how everyone works together. You heard the comment tonight, is the government can't solve everything, and some of the hearing the bad news is like, this does not need to happen today. So it will be rescheduled. I know that there was sometimes some questions, because in the past, different council members would come to a roundtable. But it was never designed to be a policy committee, and therefore trying to create it into one and then have to follow Brown Act rules really gets in the way of the innovation that comes from what they are capable of doing. We just need to connect with them and stay connected and make sure that we are able to communicate what we're doing and learn what they're doing, and just what I would say strengthen that relationship.
I appreciate that. I didn't think about the policy side that we represent. I was just looking at.
More to come. I think that it'll be helpful to have that report out, but so we don't violate it as if somehow we're interacting with a group while there's a report out, then all of a sudden it turns into a policy.
Sure.
That can always be recorded. We can always watch it. But as I used to chair them, every once in a while, a council member would show up to one and would come simply as, I'm just a member of the community, so that it wouldn't interfere.
Yes,
So,
and I agree with that. And I don't want it to be one of your committees.
But certainly I appreciate the passion that you have for it, and I think a lot of us do as well. Councilmember Silva?
Yes, thank you. So, today, I saw two young boys that'll carried in to the father's house, and I got to thank them for opening up their space for folks to be able to honor one of our officers. And as soon as I saw those boys, it just triggered a lot of things within me. But I also realized that someday those two boys are going to grow up and want to know more about their dad, and they're going to do some research. And then Matt's grandkids are going to do the same thing to look up, a little bit more about about their grandfather. And it's pretty devastating to have loss of life through different tragedy. And when the kids are involved, it's something that drives it even more to the heart. Same thing as a parent in the imagination of losing your child. So, my heart, my prayers, all the good spirits that I pray to look over all of us in our times of need. I absolutely hope that they continue to look and guide their loved ones through the times that are to come. And it's things sometimes feel like they're going to get easier, and out of nowhere it just hits you, and it can be 25, 30, 40 years down the road. I first met Officer Bowen. He had reached out several times through email. I'm not very good at staying on top of my emails, but he was diligent in asking feedback on where community members had the most concern about traffic issues. So we met up and just talked about different particular areas in town that folks have concerns. And one of the areas that's where his last call was on. And I can't imagine a lot of things that people are going through, as far as self-doubting and questioning himself. Sometimes they call it survivor guilt, or what could we have done better. But I absolutely want the community to know. I want his boys to know that he was doing his job. And when folks question, hey, where's the cops? What are they doing? Matt was doing his job, and he was doing it selflessly. And to see the kindness reverberated throughout the different stories told, to the mayor's point, absolutely, we should all constantly be reminded without tragedy that we should all live a life of being kind to one another. We can get tipped off once in a while, but I think that is absolutely the legacy that Matt Bowen will leave for our community. Brighton, I last remember seeing him pouring rain at a neighborhood cleanup with a big old smile, carrying a bunch of stuff into a big dumpster off of a Marshall Road area. And so that kid was always bright, happy to help, helped out with a lot of different community events. And likewise with both gentlemen, my condolences go out to the family, all their coworkers. I know a lot of times we're very close with our coworkers, and I can't extend the appreciation throughout the community for respecting the family's wishes and making sure that people have their time to cope and go through the process. Got to thank Chief Dan Marshall and his crew. That first night, Fairfield PD came out and did what they could to make sure they covered the staff here so they can get the time that they needed to be there for their brother. So definitely want to extend my, again, condolences, but gratitude for the service and legacy that they will leave forever in Vacaville. Emily, thank you so much. Throughout your career, you've been criticized, but I know everything that you've done. I want you to know that I know it comes from a good place. Your passion to make sure that people are housed, to make sure that people have a place to grow up and live. And who would know that one of your last projects has nothing to do with housing, but the ability to still improve the quality of life. And I just want to thank you for all your efforts and leadership throughout the years, and I wish you well on the next journey. So last note, was grateful. I didn't throw out a pitch, thankfully, but you know, the Parks and Rec department, they do a wonderful job, really trying to pull the community together to different sports activities. So many of us had the opportunity to go out and at least attempt to hit a ball off a tee, which is always harder than you think. Man, we ain't got to talk about that, right? And but no, it's just, you know, even through a lot of the challenging times, it's absolutely beautiful to see we live in a community that we continue to find different ways to come together and support one another. And just want to thank everybody for that.
Councilmember Wiley.
Just a few similar comments, but just thanking Emily for her work with housing, because it's been so great that you've done for Vacaville, and I know that you really care about the people you are trying to house. So I am looking forward to seeing the agenda item that wasn't covered tonight to be on a future item, because I want to hear more about if that's a possibility for Vacaville. And I just haven't seen notice, but I'm assuming that the cooling centers are running this week when it's so hot. I say no, because they don't meet a certain threshold. So people are really hot, so anything that we can do to help people that we see that need a cool glass of water would be great. And then I did attend the services this week, and it is a terrific loss for our city and the families and of the police and fire departments. So I also really appreciate the community's support behind that. In addition to this, last week I attended a celebration for Matt Earhart, who was the head of the Yolo Solana Air Quality Board when I first joined that committee, being an elected. And he passed in 22 from a bicycle accident. And so last week on Pedrick Road, there was a section of Pedrick Road from I-80 to the Yolo County that now has a dedicated, really beautiful bike lane. And while we were having the ceremony unveiling that with his family, there were bikers that were going by. And I talked to the people, and they said a lot of people from Vacaville use that because some of my neighbors are bikers and they ride to Davis and that. So it will be utilized by county people. So I just wanted to mention that there was a new section in memory of Matt Earhart on Pedrick Road. And then all that, just, you know, life is precious and relationships matter. So we just need to remember that all the time. And relationships are built with our neighbors and in our community. And because of the tragedies this week, a National Night Out is not going to be hosted as a city event. Some neighborhoods may still do it next week, or probably in 2 weeks. But we will have the National Night Out as a city on October 1st. And they've been trying to get that word out. So if you haven't heard that, I just wanted to let you know that. And it will be nice to just be with the neighborhoods on National Night Out on October 1st. Thank you.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you. I won't reiterate everything, but my continued condolences to both Bryden and Matthew's families, their first responder families, and the community members and friends that knew them and loved them. I can't begin to tell you how emotional the last few weeks have been for me. I can't imagine what they have been like for our police department and our fire department. And I really want to commend all of them. The biggest strength that I see within our police and fire department is the fact that every single person was there for every single person. And when nobody knew what to do, they knew where to be, and that was next to each other. You know, I saw tremendous amounts of compassion and leadership within our police department and our fire department over the last couple of weeks. And we are so blessed to live in this community. And it is not a coincidence that our community is safe and that people love living here. And it's because of all of our amazing police and firefighters and city staff and the folks that really pour their heart and soul into not just the jobs that they do, but the community that they clearly love. Because there's a lot of places that you could do the things that you do, but you do them here, and it shows in everything that you do. I wanted to also, just on a separate note, offer my appreciation, again, Fairfield PD, their staff, their dispatchers, their officers. I wanted to thank the folks over at OES, Solano County Sheriff Tom Ferrara, Captain Jackson Harris, Frank Smith, for helping with the procession. Fairfield Police Officer Cade Beckwith, Carly Stone, got that together with Lieutenant Willis. It was really just all hands on deck, but I also want to thank CHP, took over the scene and freed our officers up. My heart also goes out to the Station 73 firefighters that 2 days in a row responded to seeing people that they work with every day not here anymore. So it's very sad, but only sad because we love and appreciate the people that we serve with every single day. So my heart goes out to all of them. I am grateful for all of you and for the support that I have seen shared amongst city staff, our police department, and our fire department. I'm very grateful. Switching gears, Emily, I want to personally thank you for tolerating me and everything with the new Cap Solano and all the amazing work you've done for the city. It has been an absolute pleasure to work with you. I see your heart in the people that you serve and try to help find housing, help with their housing needs. And it's going to be big shoes to fill, but I'm grateful for you and your grace with a young, brand new council member that was trying to figure things out. And I learned a lot from you, and I just can't thank you enough for the time that you spent with me and everybody else up here. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's art as well. I think it's very metaphoric of kind of what we're dealing with right now and looking up and trying to see what the future holds for us. And it's just really, I think, an inspiring art piece. The last thing I wanted to bring up is Saturday at the Roland Air Museum. They're having a Tuskegee Airmen museum. They're going to for Lieutenant Colonel James C. Warren. They're going to have some exhibits and things there on that. So if you're looking for something to do to spend time with your kids or your family members, it's a great opportunity. I ran into some of the Tuskegee Airmen, a chapter for the Tuskegee Airmen out of Travis Air Force Base at a Juneteenth event, and they told me about this. And so I think it would be a great opportunity to go out and learn just about the amazing courage of those individuals as well. So the last thing I ask, if we haven't learned enough over the past couple weeks how precious life is, the one thing that I would ask each of you to do is go home, hug your loved ones, tell them you love them, embrace them, because every day that we have to be with the people that we love should be valued, and life isn't forever, so make the most of it.
Councilmember Ritchie, Vice Mayor Ritchie.
That's okay. You know, I don't want to repeat what everybody said. It's just everyone has amazing comments. At this point, it's just, Emily, I mean, it was very powerful to be there today, and it was just, the hard part is, you know, seeing the wife and the kids and the beautiful slide, but where it stopped and how much more life he had with his kids. And as I have my little rascals, I guarantee those suckers will be in bed. My wife, I get home, I'm sleeping in the spare bedroom. But those things that, as I see him holding the kids, that train stopped early. And that was the hardest part, being a dad myself. And just support in all the police departments all over in the city. Walking up there, still walking through thousands of police officers, still feels weird. But all of a sudden I see Irvine PD there, and I quickly chat my friend who's a lieutenant in Irvine PD, who was born and raised in Vacaville, grew up, and they made sure the officers came here. Like, it's amazing how this community And what, like the mayor said, we come together, but we're always together. Sometimes it takes tragedy to notice that, but walking there was amazing. Like, it reminded me why my father decided Travis was the last base he wanted to be at, because he got here and realized it was different. And so it's an amazing place, and the people that make this community are amazing. And the people in this room, the passion, it was really tough. It was really tough to see his journey stop early. And, you know, he's just doing what he's supposed to do in life. And it was a hard thing to see. But I appreciate everybody's comments. But me and Mike did an event. I would love to talk about the next council meeting, but I think it's appropriate to just reflect and focus on what matters. But I appreciate everything. It was really tough.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a hard day for so many of us. It's been a long day, and speaking with my wife when we got home, and she said, "Why do I feel so tired?" I said, "That is what emotional energy, when it's drained from you, feels like." And but nothing more uplifting than to drive through this city today. Thank you, Captain Callis, for driving me through this. Sometimes you just sit in silence and take it in. They don't know who's in each car, but they would wave. Little children, young and old, standing at attention, standing out in the sun. You name it, from Caltrans to the cleanup crews. Brian, I want to thank you. Please pass on our appreciation to the entire staff, because I mean, the whole city has come together, but all that you have done, I mean, looking around, driveways blocked, roadway, everything about it. In my career, in 32 years, having been to some of these tragic but honoring memorials, to have one in our own community was always the nightmare that you never, ever want to have to experience. But your staff was amazing, and thank you, and please pass along our appreciation for that. You always are. I mean, the team is always willing to do the hard work, and it was a tough day, but to see your one intersection after another, to see an engine and see everyone at attention. I saw you. I mean, you drive around and you see thousands of people today, but you can still pick people out of a crowd and go, "There's so-and-so." And I think, Captain, there's my son, your son, right? And you relish in that because you realize how sad of a day it is, but the goal of today was to honor and remember him. And so that's what we did today. His end of watch is a very personal thing to a police officer, to hear the last radio call and to know that, badge 854 will never be forgotten. And it shouldn't, and it's a reminder to us all. But, and again, thank both of you, Chris and Dave, to see how much, I know how much work has gone behind the scenes. Please pass on our appreciation for the team. The compliments that I've heard from the agencies have come from out of state. It's far away, I think Idaho and other places. Who knows how far they came. But they wanted to honor the officer, but they also wanted to honor our community. Our community saw it, and they saw our community. And that was probably the most honoring thing that I could even reflect on as we come to a close. We are going to go into closed session. This is a conference with real property negotiators. It's over Mango Materials. But tonight, in adjournment, we're going to adjourn in their memory, Officer Matthew Bowen and also Ryan Nadasdy. So keep their family in your hearts and prayers. It's going to get quiet for the families, and this is when it gets difficult. With that, we're going to adjourn. Good night, Vacaville.